Hello, my name is Margaret Adele, and welcome to the longest video I have ever made and a return to my roots. Because yes, if you have been a fan of my channel for a while, and I know there are some of you watching this, I am going to go back to reviewing indie books with full video reviews. This was the majority of my channel for the longest time. When I first started it in October of 2018, I knew I wanted to focus on indie books as a whole, and then December of that year, I got an email offering me an ARC. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can do this? I can just email back and forth with authors and get ARCs? It was mind-blowing to me, but I uploaded that first review in January of 2019, and it took off from there. And for years, that was like the primary thing I was known for. I was the channel you go to for the really random niche indie picks that other people aren't talking a lot about. And I love that. But over time, it got very exhausting. This is one of those things where I have no illusions that this will ever be my full-time job. Ever. I don't think I'll ever even get this channel monetized, to be honest. That would be surprising. But getting to get on camera and talk about random books that most people haven't heard about was really fun for me until it wasn't. And in October of 2023, I announced that I was stepping away from BookTube. I still had a couple more videos to upload. There were other books that I had accepted for review, promising a video review, and I wanted to follow through on those promises. And of course, I had to brag about getting to a 0 TBR, because obviously. And when I came back in January of this year, 2025, I was unsure if I was going to bring back indie book reviews because they're so much more labor intensive than just writing a blog post. Because I was still reviewing indie books when I was off BookTube. I tried it on my TikTok a little bit, but I am not in BookTok. Okay, when I was on TikTok, I was very specifically in the D&D Ren Fair space. But even then, I left there too when it started feeling icky after all the potential bans. So not even there anymore. But regardless, I've been thinking about it for months and how I don't get to talk about these random books and how a lot of these reviews, while they get very, very few views up front, they can actually explode as a book gets more traction. And it's so much fun to be like, I was there first, and getting to see that author's work suddenly pick up when an old review from maybe even years ago suddenly is getting hundreds of views. It's so cool, and I want to bring that back. But I was thinking to myself, but what about all the other books? The authors that accepted just getting a blog post when everyone else got videos. And so I thought to myself, if I'm going to go back, I'm going to have to catch up. So this video is me reviewing every single book I've gotten in that time frame. Every book that I got and read and reviewed on the blog is now getting its own little video review here. And it was so much work. Days and days of work of doing little snippets of filming sessions until my brain wanted to explode from trying to be all analytical but also engaging. And they're not as long as the ones moving forward will be, because most of these books are only spoken about for somewhere between 3 to 5 minutes, because I had to fit in 36 of them, which, to be honest, I honestly thought that number was going to be higher. I feel like I was slacking a little bit. And even now I'm like struggling. I got to pick it back up. We'll get it back up, I promise. So please enjoy these 36 book reviews for an array of books across genres. For those that are part of a series, I will be speaking more vaguely to avoid any spoilers. And for any series, I will have a link to the first book in that series linked down below. And of course, all of these are on my blog, which will also be linked below. Now, if you are an author that would like a review, well, you can wait till the end for more info. First up, we have Memoir of a Mad Scientist by Erin Z. Anderson. And I won't lie, this one was published on the blog so long ago. It was the very first one in October of 2023 that part of me was like, should I just read the blog post? But no, that would kind of negate the purpose of a video review anyway. Screen readers exist. Regardless, this is a sci-fi all about a quote-unquote mad scientist named Jarian, who has been working for the coalition government of this sci-fi world to make what he thinks are devices for asteroid mining and cybernetics. And when a young worker gets both of his arms blown off, he becomes the perfect test subject for Jarian's new cybernetic implants. And the supervisor is really coming down on him like every true academic to impress the politicians to get more funding. But as Jarian begins to connect with this worker, he begins to realize that things aren't as great as he thought they were from his little sequestered office. This is an anti-utopian, a book in which the main character thinks they live in a positive utopian world, only to discover, whoops, not really. Think Brave New World. And in this case, I actually don't mind it because I feel like in most cases in anti-utopian, it's kind of hard to make it both anti and utopian. Like, you want it to be utopian enough that it makes sense that the character didn't see the cracks. And in this one, he has an easy out. He's a scientist that spends most of his time in his lab or in his office. He doesn't really interact with people, so it's a little bit more excusable that he didn't see the giant things going wrong. But yes, he discovers that the supposed things that he thought were just for simple, happy issues, actually much darker. And I won't reveal too much, obviously, but it is pretty standard fare if you've read any anti-utopian. I do love how when we do have the inevitable meeting of the rebellion is not perfectly morally gray. They have infighting, they have ends justify the means mentality. They have a lot of emphasis on, the government is so bad that anything we do to them isn't really as bad. And Jarian definitely feels caught in the middle, struggling with not wanting to be the mad scientist. He never really was, but also not really liking the new rebellion either and kind of caught in the middle. He really only had like one particularly mad science-y moment at the end during the climax of a big thing. But I also, and I had to reread the blog post to remember this, there were references to him being bisexual, like just toss away things that was like, oh yeah, that guy looked familiar, but he didn't think they dated. And I was like, I see you, Aaron Z. Anderson. Happy Pride Month, everybody. I really hope I get this out in June. Regardless, the big thing for me was the ending, because I hate unearned happy endings. I hate when a giant, huge uber conflict that cannot possibly be ended completely happy is set up and then somehow gets a complete happy ending. And this one actually has my favorite vibe of ending, which is bittersweet. A lot is lost, but there's still a lot of potential, which felt like the most fitting ending. It felt like the author did not think, oh, how can I shove happiness and hope into the end, but rather thought, how can I give the most logical conclusion for what I've set up? I really enjoyed this one. I am a little bit bummed that I don't remember much more. Like, even now I'm looking into this, and these blog posts are very long, right? Talking for a full 10 minutes in a video versus writing a blog post that's read in 6 minutes is an entirely different ball game, and it's part of the reason I stopped filming videos, because they're just a lot more effort than writing blog posts. So that's most of what I remember. I do remember really enjoying it, but for the most part, the only real issue I had was it got a little too tech talky, which I can't really blame it. It's a sci-fi, but I am more of the softer sci-fi side nerd. And so there were some moments where I was like just glazing over, like, I'm just, okay, cool, the thing, what does the thing do? Okay, I don't need to know how it works. What thing do? Okay, thing do that. Cool. But beyond that, it wasn't too bad. And overall, if you do like some, chaos queer scientists fighting a dystopian government, this one is probably for you. Curiosity Caught the Demon by Travis Bedoin. This is a queer romance by one of my favorite authors. I think I've given everything I've read by Travis Bedoin 5 stars at this point, every short story and every book. So I was pretty sure, even when I got this one, that it was going to be a 5-star. But this is all about a young man named Scott who is in dire straits with the shop he inherited from his grandmother. The very classic greedy businessmen / greedy family members want him to sell to get the money, and it's all going to be turned into chain stores instead of the cute little downtown type Hallmark deal. And while our friend Scott wishes on the star, he accidentally summons a demon, and the demon is like, okay, I'll help you with the shop, but only because I want your soul later and totally not because you're cute. And of course, as they work out this, demonic deal, feelings happen. And I love this author's ability to create such gay pining. Gay pining is the superior form of pining. I think we all know that. But it is a testament to how good he is at it, because usually I don't like romances under 200 pages. I'm usually such a slow burn girly. I want the yearning. But he's so good at it that even under 200 pages, I was like, yeah, it's still good. Still works. I usually do like a dual POV in a romance, or I guess a multi POV if we're talking polyamory, but it was fun to be in Gremory's head for the entire thing. I feel like that's a POV you wouldn't get very often, and just the way he views the world and thinks of the world was very interesting. You do actually get to see a little bit of hell, and I don't usually go for surreal things, but there's just something about the descriptions in here. Like, I even over a year later, I could still remember, oh yeah, that's what that one scene looked like, which is very rare for me. But Travis is just one of those authors that loves writing. I don't want to reveal too much about him as a person, because he is very like anonymous online, but we've been friends for a while. We've talked for a while. And so I know that like he just loves literature, like hardcore loves that kind of writing style. And even when he's writing a cutesy queer romance, he's putting his entire writing bussy into it. Are we still saying that? That sounds awkward coming out of my mouth. I'm not going to say it again. Regardless, the sex scenes were delightful. Every one of them had a paranormal aspect. You always knew that you were dealing with a paranormal romance. And there was one particular moment when I was rereading the blog post where I mentioned like, oh, demonic possession is sexy, and it took me a second. And then I remembered the scene I was referring to, and I was like, oh yeah, I do remember that. That was a fun one. The plot line is pretty cut and paste beyond the demonic aspect for a Hallmark-esque type story, although Hallmark's never done anything with a cute demon helping the protagonist out, but they should. It's a wasted potential right there. Regardless, I feel like this one will be popular with a lot of people. Pretty much anyone that likes cozy queer romances is gonna be for this one. I do give him credit. There weren't quite as many mentions of fluid, because I have spoken about that before with some of his other work. Regardless, highly enjoyed it and would highly recommend it. Greater Than His Nature by Atomic Carnival Books. So a little bit of fun fact about reviewing. The more reviews you put out, the more review requests you get. And very often they are in the same vein as something you've just published. And so I was not surprised to see this one in my inbox shortly after I had published Memoir of a Mad Scientist. Although I am surprised at how quickly I got to this one. Only like a couple weeks after I got it, probably. I am not as on top of things right now, but regardless, this is an anthology of different tales of mad scientists, but on a little different take. It is not quite as big an emphasis on the hubris and how you shouldn't mess with the human body, because a lot of the writers in this anthology are disabled. The editor did make a point of telling me when they sent me the request that they do not consider this a disability anthology, you know, one of those anthologies where the entire point of it is the identity, but there are such a significant amount of disabled authors in this work that the theme of, hey, sometimes using science to alter ourselves is a good thing. And, you know, I'm someone that daily takes in artificial hormones to improve my quality of life because my body can't produce good hormones for shit. So I really resonated with that. And I'm not going to do the anthology thing where I review every single little story and give every single little story a star rating, because in my mind, an anthology is being sold as an entire put together product. So that's how I'm going to review it. And I tend to put more focus on curation of anthologies. And this one was incredibly well curated. I never felt like I had tonal whiplash going from story to story. Not to say that they were all the same. There were definitely, you know, some were more hopeful. Some still had a little bit of that hubris. Some had giant spiders. Other had body horror. So they were different enough, but it still made sense that they were all in the same anthology. If that makes sense. Like they felt like they fit, even though they were from disparate authors. Now this was also from a point when I used to essentially rate a sci-fi book for how well it would work for beginners, because this was back when a lot of people were like, nervous about getting into sci-fi books. I don't do it for sci-fi in general anymore. I might do it for things like monster romance or lit RPGs, those very, very niche genres. But apparently I decided that this one was not incredibly beginner friendly because of all the gore and body horror. But I guess if you're already a horror fan and you want to get into sci-fi, that would work for this one. It's definitely sci-fi horror in a lot of cases. Although I did like the one, I actually did enjoy the one with the giant spiders. I did not think I would because giant spiders. But regardless, if you are on the lookout for some mad science with a little bit of a twist, a little bit of a new way of looking at it from a perspective of authors who are disabled, check this one out. Of Nights and Books and Falling in Love by Rita A. Rubin. This is a queer norm cozy romantic fantasy all about a hero that is trapped by the Dark Lord and being magically tortured by the Dark Lord's second in command. But he discovers a way to convince the Dark Lord's second in command to not only let him go, but to run away with him and head back to his hometown. And they begin the process of falling in love. And I apparently, according to the blog post, thought this one was longer than it was. My guess is I had probably looked up the page count on like Amazon or Goodreads when I accepted it, and those tend to already be a little bit longish, a little bit longer than the actual book will be. And I apparently had not fully learned that yet, because when I got it, I looked at the page count and I'm like, oh no, I might not find this satisfying, because again, generally speaking, minus some exceptions, I am a slow burn girly. I tend to want my romances to be a minimum of 200 pages, and even that's like short-ish. And this one definitely felt too short, mostly because I was robbed of the redemption arc that I desperately wanted to see. Because when our character Jace, formerly Gray, was the Dark Lord's second in command, he committed war crimes, like a lot of war crimes, and it didn't seem like there was ever really any redemption for that. Like, it was all hand waved away as not really his fault. It was all the Dark Lord, manipulating him. None of it was really him. He just used his magic to murder innocents, but it wasn't like totally his fault. And he's almost never called out for it. He's almost never really addressing his war crimes. It's all just not his fault. But for me, it's like, okay, if none of that was really his fault, and you're not really going to have that be something that's addressed, because cozy, why was that the premise? And this is my issue with a lot of cozy books, okay? Because I did like Legends and Lattes, but the more I try to get into cozy books, the more I think that was a fluke, because I find that a lot of cozy books are really just standard plots, but they deaden, mute, suppress all of the emotions of the characters so that they're not feeling the full range of negative emotions that they should be feeling. Because while, yes, Jace does feel some amount of negative emotions towards what he did, it's really not that much. According to this, there was really only 1 or 2 scenes, and then he's making amends. But his amends for, again, war crimes, death, mass amounts of death, is helping a kid that's being bullied. And so there's this element of, if you wanted it to be cozy and you didn't really want to have to deal with such negative feelings of, oh God, what have I done, and making amends for these giant moral issues, why have that be in it? Why not have it just be some, random underling, some random custodial type character that was forced to clean the dungeon for the Dark Lord because they had no other way, and they didn't really do much outside of cleaning the dungeon, help the hero escape? Like, why was that the premise? Because I am a melodramatic bitch. You cannot give me the potential for a giant, angsty, moral quandary, melodramatic arc and then not follow through. I wanted the drama, I wanted the angst, I wanted the grappling, but because it's cozy, we can't actually have all the big tangle of negative emotions. We have to wash it all away, suppress it, make it cute, and so we don't get it. And yes, the more I thought about this, the more I realized how much of an issue I had with this in this book. I didn't think I had that much of an issue. It is still a quick read. If you do like cozy books, that is probably still going to be your vibe. Like I said, I usually don't like short books. I usually don't like cozy books. I don't know if I just hadn't fully realized that about myself, because I used to think I was a cozy fan, again, just because of Travis Baldry. But I want to watch more people set up their shops in high fantasy worlds. Like, And also, again, if it's going to be cozy, you need to make the premise itself cozy. Don't give the melodramatic premise and then not follow through on the melodrama, because your girl needs angst. Pallas Lost by Jake Morrison is a space opera about a lost ship named Pallas. Like it says on the tin. Pallas carried an AI that was the most advanced thing humanity had ever created and the location of Earth. When it goes missing, not only is that AI lost, but now no one can go back to the planet. So these 15 colonies of humans have kind of just been chilling out, stuck. But our ragtag crew of protagonists, because space opera, stumbles across a clue to Pallas's location, thereby inciting a chase to find it before the many antagonists do. Now, what this book had going for it the most was its action scenes. At one point, the chapter begins like a character is introduced while in the middle of a firefight, and it's very fast-paced, and we gotta do the thing, and you felt the threat of the antagonists, and you felt the chase, which is really what you want in a space opera. It's one of the things they're best at, that kind of high-paced, we have to stay one step, one ship's length ahead of the enemy type vibe, and I really appreciated that. And in general, the plot tended to be where it was at its strength. However, its greatest weakness was the dialogue. Now, I have noticed that dialogue tends to be a really big struggle for a lot of debut authors, and this is a debut, or was rather, again, this is all from like a year ago. But regardless, this had what I like to call video game dialogue. If you've ever played a video game where you are the player character and the player character needs to give you a hint because the game doesn't think you know what you're doing, the character will just casually speak to themselves in a way that no one really does. Like, hey, I should check that glowing box over there. Like, you wouldn't say that out loud to yourself, right? If you were by yourself, you would just, hey, and go over. But this had a lot of that where characters would decide on a plan, but then they would have to announce the plan they were doing. Like, they would say, oh, let's go. And they would gesture to the window, but then they would have to say, we're going to escape out the window. But you don't need to say that. Just the, oh, look, let's go. And them leading out the window, the reader would get it that was the plan all along. But I just have noticed, and I could probably do an entire video just on common debut author mistakes, because I've reviewed so many debuts and they tend to have a lot of the same issues. And there tends to be a lot of nervousness around making sure that the reader fully understands what you're saying. And so that leads to a kind of a habit of over explaining something that the reader could easily infer, or at least the average reader could easily infer. And you gotta trust that your readers are smart enough to get there. But beyond that, it was still very fast paced. I did not continue with this series. Oh yes. I also had some struggles with explanations on the tech. Like I mentioned before, I am not the hardest sci-fi lover. I tend to prefer soft side, but this one was strange because they had these in-depth explanations of tech that didn't have any purpose in the plot. It's something to explain, how a weapon works before you use it. But in this case, there was a moment where they explained how blasters work in all of this, paragraph of detail, and then didn't use it at all. And so we're like, okay, what was the point of that? It might have just been to show off world building, but if you're not using the world building, most of it's going to go whoop right out of the reader's mind. The best world building is the one that gets used in the plot, or the characters use it somehow. It affects them somehow. So those kind of explanations were a little bit frustrating. Regardless, still a very fast-paced space opera. Well, I did not continue with this series. If you are a fan of those kinds of things, you'll probably enjoy this one. 3 Meant to Be by M.N. Bennett is an adult urban fantasy all about a teacher named Dorian who was still reeling from grief from the loss of one of his boyfriends. He was once part of a triad. They had abilities to see the past, present, and future, and they swore they were going to be the next big thing until one of them passed away. Now Dorian is living a lackluster life, but Milo, his clairvoyant former lover, swears they can still have their happy ending and is pretty doggedly chasing after him. And when they kiss, Dorian gets the vision of one of his students dying pretty terribly. Now Dorian is on a race to stop that from happening, but Milo isn't giving a lot of information, but then that's kind of a clairvoyant thing, right? Regardless, I usually don't like books set in schools because it usually comes across pretty unrealistic as someone that works in a school, but this was written by a teacher, and it shows. Like, at one point, they're in like a talk of a guest speaker and they're talking about this great 10-year plan for the district. Meanwhile, they know damn well they're going to abandon that plan after 2 years and pivot to something else again. Like, oh, it's so real. It's so real. And all of the bureaucracy behind the scenes of working in education, like, it was so good. Like, I'm not a teacher, I'm a para, but like, I chat with the teachers. I see what it's like. I have to go to those guest speakers too. So it was really realistic. And M.N. Bennett is, again, one of those queer male authors that just does gay pining so well. The superior form of pining, once again. The only thing for me was the magic system was very complex. There's like branches and like subcategories, and I only vaguely got it. That probably was because he has his own homeroom of students, and like they each have different abilities, and so it's trying to explain a bunch of different types of magic at once, and it was all relevant. There is a big climactic scene where they are literally fighting for their lives, and it is kind of fun to see how that prophecy played out. I never like it when a book has a prophecy and then it comes true exactly how basically it says it's going to. Like, I want a little twist it. Don't just tell me what the ending is going to be. Don't let the book spoil itself, okay? Surprise me. And it was very surprising. Dorian is definitely one of those lovable assholes, but you kind of see why. I mean, granted, it shows him in flashbacks he was always kind of an asshole, but he is basically bombarded with thoughts all day, every day. Like, it's so hard for him to just have his own head to himself. And again, he's still grieving the loss of this former partner and not knowing even how to connect with the other partner because their former was the bridge between them. And so essentially seeing them still being in love, but having to essentially recreate a new relationship dynamic between them was very interesting. It was very Grumpy Sunshine dynamics. And I just love stories that talk about grief, not just show the death of a person on page, but like watching someone having to work through it. And I was especially intrigued by that. It be happening within a polycule. It was very interesting. While this book ends not terribly, it's still definitely setting up the big bad for the future of this series. I have not continued with this series, but you know, Mr. Bennett, if you want to, I'll take the next one. Regardless, overall, really enjoyed this one. I definitely think any other working teacher is probably going to get a lot out of the very realistic elements of it, even though it's a magic school, and I don't usually like magic schools. And also just the dynamic between the two of them. Were there sex scenes? Let me look. I think there were. Yes, there was. Or at least steamy scenes. So I think that's sex scenes. So there you go. You have that if you like that. Regardless, yay gay pining. Homecoming Chaos by D.W. Brooks is a romantic thriller following the prodigal daughter Jamie Scott as she finally returns home. 4 years ago, she ran out on her own wedding to join the Peace Corps, and no one in the family really knows why. She is back, hoping to make amends, but just as she comes back, a dead body pops up in the parking lot of the family business, and she finds herself pulled into the investigation. Totally nuts, because the lead detective is a total hottie. Okay, maybe that's a little bit part of the reason, but still, she is trying to figure out, was this one of their employees? Is their business in danger? All while having some sexual tension with the detective, but also trying to still make those amends. And honestly, any scene with the Scotts together, the Scott family, especially Jamie and her mother, and trying to rebuild things and just trying to repair what seemed so damaged for so many years, I loved those scenes. Okay, I love the breaking cycles. I love the healing trauma. Chef's kiss. Love that part. What kind of let me down a little bit was the actual thriller element. While there were a slew of potential mysteries in here and potential for great tension, the story didn't seem to want to keep any of its secrets. Whereas, a character would get introduced, and instead of letting the character be all mysterious, oh, could they be the person we're looking for? Could they be connected to it? No, you would get the entire backstory. All of the dirty secrets and all. At one point, someone makes a mysterious reference to having to go to the ER, and then in the narrative, it explains the entire reason they had to go. And then the character also explains the entire reason they had to go. And this happens a couple times. And I believe this is a debut, and this is a debut author mistake. I don't see as much as the dialogue issue, but it does still happen where the same story beats are revealed both in narrative and in dialogue. And while you can't reveal everything through dialogue, right? Sometimes you just have to have the expository paragraph to write things out to make sure people understand it. If you have the option to reveal something in dialogue, always save the reveal for the dialogue, because if the reader is experiencing it while the character is, it hits harder. Now, there are some differences in that, right? For example, if you want the reader to know something that the character does not, because you want to build tension, because the reader knows that the character is in danger when they don't know it, that's one thing. But again, this story didn't want to build tension, or that's what it felt like. It gave all the cards away very quickly. As for the romance, they definitely had sexual tension. In spades, had it. The problem is, I was robbed of one of my favorite romance tropes, okay? And that is when one character, character A, is in peril, and then character B just loses their shit. Oh, it's my jam. We didn't get it here, okay? A character gets in danger, and the other character, completely cool head about it. I needed more emotional distress. We've talked about this before. I am a melodramatic bitch. I need that emotional distress. I sound like a terrible person, I swear I'm not, but that's why I wish we had more of that. In general, I kind of want to read just like a contemporary by this author, and I don't usually read contemporaries, but again, they did a fantastic job of those, rebuilding family dynamics. It was just, the thriller didn't thrill for me, but still, I think if you want to see those redemptive aspects, why did you run, and complicated relationships with mothers and all of that, I definitely think this one would be right up your alley. But again, keep your secrets sometimes. It's okay to keep some secrets. Stone Soup by E.B. Mann is a YA fairy tale following a young girl named Green Eyes as she is in a pretty horrible, abusive situation with her mother, only to discover by a talking crow that not everything is as it seems, and now she must start on a quest to find out who she really is. Now, I honestly don't know what I was thinking when I picked this one, because I know by now that a YA fairy tale is definitely not my jam. I haven't read a lot of YA recently. I haven't read fairy tales for forever. There are one or two authors whose work that I just adore on their own that can get away with sending me a fairy tale, but at this point, I probably wouldn't accept one. I haven't accepted a YA in so long at this point, and I felt bad because as I was putting together my giant review list to do for this project, I knew I'd read this one. I could remember nothing from this story, and I'm looking through this blog post being like, okay, I guess I thought that. And I'm racking my brain. There was something with a leopard or a big cat, and there was something with a swamp. But I'm really going to have to rely on the blog post with this one. I don't know why I just went ploop, maybe because it's a fairy tale. I just don't vibe with that writing style. I've tried so often. But regardless, according to this, it was one of those weird books where it's like, is it a high middle grade, an old middle grade, or a young YA? It was kind of that cusp where I couldn't quite grasp exactly what age range it wanted to be for. And apparently I also had a lot of problems with the verisimilitude and the plot. I used the phrase moon logic, and I've got to use that more in reviews. I just like using video game terminology in reviews. Okay, it's fun for me. But moon logic in that Green Eyes solves a puzzle through a riddle that was seemingly unconnected, and it was really hard to figure out how she had gotten from point A to point B, or things would just magically happen. They would just luck out and find something that progresses the plot, which is probably just a fairy tale story thing, which is again probably why I don't like it as much. I like to see the reason of the world and see, okay, why we went from point A to point B. And it looks like I did enjoy the arc Green Eyes takes in coming to terms with the trauma from being abused, and growing and healing from that. So that's nice. I always like to see that stuff in books. But I'm also finding out I was apparently looking for a good tear-jerking reunion scene, and it was brushed over. I don't remember what scene I was looking for, but I know that if I ever get robbed of my big tearful reunion scene, I am upset. I love a good, lost family finding each other or friends coming back together at the end of a long quest. Like, love it. So, honestly, being robbed of that, I might take off a star for that in itself. I don't know if I did here. I don't really care about star ratings at this point anymore. But I still think if you like traditional YA fairy tales, you're probably like this one. Like I said, if someone was to send me something like this today, I would definitely say no, just because I know it's not my vibe, and apparently it doesn't, my brain can't even hold on to it. But if it's something you like, you should probably still check it out. Underdogs by Freya Faust. This is the third book in the urban fantasy series The Burke Misadventures, following a pair of siblings who have some problems with the local magic government that is in this world, the secret local magic government. Now, I'm going to speak as vaguely as possible about this book because I don't want to spoil anything, and I really don't want to have to do all the nonsense of skip ahead, skip here. So instead, we're just going to vaguely talk about the entire series. Now, this series, as a whole, at least up until this book, is super bloody. Very intense, super intense, but like in a fun way. This book was not nearly as bloody. It honestly felt a little bit like a side quest, like a little bit of a relaxation, because book one had a giant reveal at the end, and book one is also fun because you see a trans woman's egg cracking on page. And it made it real difficult to try to review that because I'm like, okay, do I use the name in the synopsis because that's the dead name, and what do I do for pronouns? But I have since learned that is one of my favorite tropes, the egg is cracked via magical means type beat. And yes, I am trying to compile a list, so if you know of one where a character is discovering they're trans because they get magically transformed for some reason, please let me know. I would love to make that list. I would love to do that trope talk. But regardless, book two ended with such a gigantic mindfuck of a twist, mindfuck of a reveal, that I was literally messaging the author on Discord to be like, you bitch, I did nothing to deserve that. I was so upset. And I put off reading this one for so long because I'm like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how it's going to happen, but I did read it, and it is much more mellow than the first two. And the author told me that ahead of time. There's a lot less blood in this one, but I did still like the dynamic. We have a possible, they have feelings, but they're not prepared to act on them. They're not in the right place for them moving forward in this book. But I also love our friend Katie, who is this cute little cutie in her cardigan, and she's obsessed with necromancy. Okay, she doesn't think it's evil. She wants to raise the dead and have zombies so bad in her cute little cardigan. I love the juxtaposition. It's so much fun. I love when the cutesy characters have a dark side. It's so good. But again, there is still some moving the plot forward in this book, but you aren't seeing, how do I explain this? You aren't seeing the group dynamic at full strength. Not everybody's here for this one. So not as much happens compared to the first two books. However, I will not be lulled into a false sense of security, Freya Faust. Okay, I know what you're like. Your ex-girlfriend told me about you. Yes, in case you didn't know, I think I mentioned it in the first book review. I found this book in the most lesbian way possible, which is someone on my the D&D Discord server I used to be on asked if I would review her ex-girlfriend's book. Ask me in a botanical center, why don't you? Ask me in a U-Haul. But I was like, well, yes, obviously. So it's gay all over this one. It's queer all over. So definitely a lot of fun, but again, it's a lot of blood, it's a lot of intensity, it's a lot of very dangerous situations, like a lot of carnage. So be aware of that if you want to start this series, but I think it's still a fun time. Learn to Howl by Jennifer R. Donahue is a YA urban fantasy following Allie as she is accosted by an asshole who won't take no, and suddenly, whoops, turns out she's a werewolf. She goes all wolfy and attacks him, and her mother freaks out. Apparently, mom is from a long line of werewolves, but she's super ultra religious and thinks they're unclean, and she considers herself purer because the gene skipped her. And she had thought that the gene had skipped her daughter as well. But when Ellie grows fur, mom freaks out and dumps her off with the aunts, who are, yes, also werewolves. But after only a couple months, the aunts are kidnapped, and now Allie must go on a cross-country road trip with her wannabe rock star cousin to get them back. Now, you may be asking yourself, Margaret YA, you were just saying not too long ago, and yes, I know, but hear me out. This is one of my ultra yes authors. Okay, this is the author that I have worked with for a very long time now. Several years at this point. I have read every book in her sci-fi heist novella series. I read that trippy, drugged out Hamlet retelling, and I already have a romantasy of all things from her in my inbox. Okay. I don't even really stop to think that much when it's a Jennifer R. Donahue book at this point. But I did accept this one because I love a good road trip story. I love a good, having to unlearn and learn things from your past type beat. But this one was kind of half and half for me, with things I liked and the things I thought could be improved. For the most part, I wish that she'd had more time with her aunts to build that relationship, because while it is technically several months in the story, it's basically a time skip, so you don't see a lot of that relationship on page. And by the time they're kidnapped, it doesn't feel like she's chasing after them out of love so much as out of desperation, because these are her legal guardians. She has nothing without them. But I did like watching the relationship between her and her wannabe rock star cousin Morgan developing. Morgan is definitely chaotic, and the dynamic between super sheltered and chaotic is always one of my favorites. But that being said, Allie didn't come across the way I would assume someone from her background would in a lot of cases, because her mother was super ultra religious, believed in purity and cleanliness of the genes type of religious, and she never ate out. Didn't even go to a restaurant, never went to the movies, was homeschooled, and no shade, cake, pastor's kid. Those kids act differently. They just do, and they'll say, I've said some horrendous things, thinking that that's just how other people thought, because that's what I'd been taught. I once made an entire honors English 2 class mad at me, but that's a conversation for another day. Regardless, Allie just seemed like a kind of a shy girl, not a girl that grew up in almost cult-like dynamics. I wanted her not to be transphobic to the trans side character that comes out to her, but to have more to unlearn, to have more to work through. Your mom literally dumped you because she thinks you're genetically impure. There should be a little bit more there. There was a little bit, but just in general, I liked the action scenes. I like that they have to team up with another clan of werewolves. I particularly liked what it did with the werewolf lore. One, it didn't have the bullshit alpha hierarchy. I hate that. I know that that's so popular in werewolf romances, and it's why I don't read them anymore. I hate the entire alpha concept so much. And it didn't have that, but it actually said oh yeah, there's actually all of the werewolf myths are true. All of these, you can get bitten and turned, or you can just be born as one, and I liked that agnosticism of werewolfness. Nope, I can't make the pun. If you can make the pun out of lycanthropy and agnosticism, please do so in the comments. Regardless, I like that aspect. However, again, this was the time when I was learning that, okay, maybe YA isn't as much my jam anymore. There are still some authors that can get away with it, as we will see later, but for the most part, I did not continue this series. But again, I still have that romantasy. And TBH, I'm not the biggest fan of romantasy either, but I have faith. Jennifer, I have faith in you. Regardless, still check this one out if you like YA urban fantasy. Up next, I will be reviewing 2 books together, and that is Abyssal Arcanist and Deathlord Arcanist by Shami Stovall. Have I since learned that it's actually pronounced arcanist? Maybe. Was I already saying arcanist for years before I listened to the audiobook and figured that out and found out that no one had been correcting me before? Also, yes. And so if no one was correcting me then, I'm just going to stick with it. Now, the author will tell you that this is not the sequel series to the Frith Chronicles. I'm going to disagree. It is. This is a YA Flintlock fantasy Pokemon where the magic system is connected to the creatures you bond with. So if you want to be a magician, an arcanist, you have to find a creature, do their trial of worth, whatever that is, and essentially become lifelong besties with them. And then your magic system is going to be tied to that creature. So, if you get a water-based creature, you're going to have water-based magic and the like. And we're talking every creature from every kind of mythology. It's actually kind of fun, I'm not going to lie. It is a little bit kind of unfortunate that one of the creatures is that creature from indigenous mythology you're not supposed to say the name of. But don't think I didn't catch it, Miss Stovall, when the creature's antlers had to be shaved off for plot reasons, and they just kind of casually didn't mention its name a little bit more. I saw it. I saw you. Regardless, this is the sequel series to the original, and it is in a magic school. Now, I don't usually like magic schools, but Shami Stovall is one of those authors that is the exception to the rule. One of those where I don't even look at the synopses of what she's sending me anymore. Usually what happens is it'll be a really long time between packages, and then I'll get a package with like several books in it all at once. That happens pretty regularly. So actually, I'm pretty sure I'm due for one here soon. How many is going to be in it? We don't know. But I got these two and a third one from a different series sent together. This one I was kind of iffy about because it was much more in the school. And it was a lot more, it wasn't quite as gigantic as the author can get, because the Frith Chronicles literally had giant kaiju monster fights in like nearly every book. And I loved it. It was my favorite. I was like, oh, can't wait to see the giant monster fight we're going to get in this one. But thankfully, this one is just so much more dramatic. And this is the book where I really emphasize that, like, yes, you can technically start with this series first, but it's gonna hit harder if you read the Frith Chronicles beforehand. And I know it's like, what, 8 books? I'm gonna count on my shelf here. 1, 2, yes, 8 books, plus the short story collection that I might not have read yet. But regardless, these take place years after, where what happened in that series is now history. They like literally study it in school as a thing that happened. But because arcanists can live for forever, you still get cameos from all of the OG characters. Where are they now? Are there queer married couples? Oh my gosh, the first time that one character said husband, I was like, yes! But also, this book gets much more intense because of where they have to go for plot reasons. And again, being vague, but one character in that place they had to go, I had suspicions, but then when they asked the name and he gave the name, I was like, no! He can't be there. It's fine. But regardless, as much as I am iffy about YA fantasy magic schools, I just love this universe. I love the magic system. I love the Eldrin and the entire concept of being besties with a little creature as to get magic. It's just so cute. And yes, we have had several different wow, I literally used the word a second ago and I've already forgotten it. Cameos from other characters. There's also a lot of talk in these books expanding a lot of the magic and the lore. This one especially introduced a lot of new reveals about how magic exists, like not quite the science of it, but like at least the ancestral beginnings of the magic, and that was really cool. But also more on the social aspects, because while this is technically a world where anyone of any class could become an arcanist, as long as they can pass that creature's trial of worth, and they can be anything from just climbing to the top of a tall hill, doing an obstacle course, or murdering your firstborn. Like, oh man, Kappas are weird. But regardless, there is still an element of classism in these books where the richer just have more access to become arcanists. They have the more resources. But also, if you bond with a certain level of creature. If you bond with a creature that is seen as weaker, you are also looked down on. So it really plays in the, yeah, everyone can be a magician. There's still hierarchies involved in this. And I love that aspect. I love that drawing out of things, that even characters that look really powerful as magicians are still facing huge societal issues. In general, I've always said it, Shammy Stowball is an author that she's basically a DM that has been burned by players not wanting to go down her many world plot rabbit holes. So she's putting them all into books, because these do read like D&D worlds that she just is going to force you to learn all of the information of. But I like learning it, so it's fine. And that's weird for me. I usually hate exposition text, but she can write it well enough that I don't mind it, which is miraculous, and part of the reason she's one of my exception authors. Defeating Demons and Breaking Up with My Boyfriend by Dylan James is a YA queer horror about a group of friends, including Eli and his boyfriend Brady, going off to have a fun camping trip at the end of their senior year. Just like one thing, Eli does want his boyfriend to have the very best camping trip ever, because he intends to break up with him at the end of it. Eli is about to age out of the foster care system and believes that he has basically no future, such little future that it would be better if Brady was not dragged down with him. Now, normally this would be the part where I'd be like, as a former foster parent, but this is Canada. The author is based in Canada, and I don't know that much about the Canadian foster care system, so I'll just go with it. But generally speaking, yeah, a lot of foster kids that age out of the system without any kind of permanent guardianship or resource family do tend to struggle a large amount. So it is a very genuine anxiety to have, but I also get the gist that Eli just has self-esteem issues overall. I did ask for this one specifically because I was doing the Pop Sugar Reading Challenge before they made the dumbass decision to integrate generative AI. They had a prompt for a deaf or hard of hearing author, and I was like, hey, I've already reviewed one of those. So I went back and I was like, hey, you got another one for me? And they were like, yeah. And I got contacted from someone in the press, and they're like, hey, there you go. So sometimes I do review books for indie presses. I just can hardly keep up with all the ones I get from indie authors. But regardless, this one is definitely what I would consider a capital Q queer horror, not just a horror with queer characters. And by that, I mean the greater themes of it do touch on queerness and the queer community as a whole. Without getting too much into details, obviously, there is an element of talking about conversion camps, talking about religious trauma. There's references to a sapphic couple, so we have, multiple different kinds of queerness. And in general, this is one that definitely welcomes the whole community as a vibe, but it is very creepy. They go visit this old church grounds, and suddenly Eli can't leave, except he does leave. Something wearing his face walks back down to the campsite with the group. It was so good. Love a good body snatching vibe. Love it. So tense. It's one of my favorite horror tropes. But there's a lot of elements of essentially having to heal to beat your demons. It's rather on the nose as an analogy. Eli has to defeat actual demons while defeating his personal demons. But this is a YA. So I'm not going to hold it against the book that it felt on the nose for me, a fully grown adult. But the only other struggle I had with it, I think, was the dialogue would just shy just too far into hokey at times, just too cutesy, at least for a horror. But overall, a great horror novella pick. It is queer, and it is perfect for Pride. I actually just went back and looked, and yes, I did publish the original written review in Pride. I know what I'm about. And I'm still waiting because the author has talked about doing a full romance with a deaf character, because while he is hard of hearing, no one in this book is. He has written characters in other books, but I still want that HOH romance. I'll wait for it. I can be patient. West Falls Revisited by D.H. Schleicher. This is a contemporary set in 2020 dealing with both COVID quarantine and the death of a young boy in the 1990s. It is told in a non-linear storytelling style, with some scenes happening back then, introducing our young victim and leading up to his death, as well as 2020, everything going on in that era, as well as new revelations about what happened that night back then. Now, I have read this author's work before, and I am very proud of myself because I read Then Came Darkness, which was a serial killer story set in the 1930s, and I referred to it in that review as Steinbeck with more murder, and the author has been using that tagline to market that book for years now. I'm so clever. I do love that though. BTW, if you have caught a line in one of my reviews and it is like a good indication of what the entire review is about, oh my God, please use that in the marketing. That's so flattering. Thank you. It's happened a couple times and it's always so much fun. But this one suffered a little bit, or rather a lot, from just having so much going on. And to explain that point more directly, I'm going to bring up the blog post and read to you everything that this book talks about in 230 pages. It talks about failure of the justice system, Trumpism, anti-queer bigotry, COVID quarantine, BLM protests, white privilege, the Catholic Church covering up sexual assault, the January 6th uprising, and even space travel. Characters suffer through multiple failing marriages, cancer, amnesia, infidelity, and more than one murder, and then at the end, each character's family gets decades into the future of where they end up. All in 230 pages. It was just so much that no one thing really got looked into. So it became less of a, okay, we're really going to dive into this theme and examine it and examine the connections to other things. And it started to feel a little bit more like woke bingo, right? Like, what social issue can I name that's going on right now? It is definitely of its time, but I'm not against that. Every book is going to be of its time. There is no such thing as a timeless book, okay? There's a reason that we have to translate Shakespeare. But this is very specific to that time in a very specific way. But there was just a lot of moments where I wanted more. And I can't fully point the finger at indie authors that have to shove a lot of story and not a lot of pages, just because I know that the cost of printing can jump up exponentially depending on what threshold of page number you cross. But there were just a lot of moments where it felt like there needed to be more. In one instance, there is this big dramatic moment where a married couple essentially splits apart. They're not formally divorced, but like the one is like, I have to leave for plot character reasons. And it's this big emotional scene, but the payoff to it was a quick overview in the narrative. Like, okay, so we have this scene and, oh yeah, BTW, this one's back now and moving on. And it's like, no. If you're gonna give me the big teary breakup scene, I deserve the big teary reunion scene. Like, it's the whole argument of like, you know, if you're gonna argue around the kids, you also have to show the kids how to make up type deal with parents. Like, if you're gonna show me the big breakup, you also gotta show me the big reunion. Don't just brush over it, okay? You cannot take a tearful reunion away from me. I can't, It's one of the big Margaret sins. If you set up a tearful reunion, you best show me that shit in every line. Regardless. I do still like this author's work in general. And I think part of the reason that this one didn't hit as hard for me as his other work is his other work was very specific in vibe and tone and setup, and just was more thoughtful, not meandering. It took its time and it was more focused. And this one just felt like an author that felt like they had to mention a cajillion things to stay on top of social issues. When, like, you don't have to, okay? I know social media tells us that if you're not talking about every single little thing going wrong all the time, you don't care. But we can't psychologically do that to ourselves. Like, okay, pick the thing that you feel that you can really dive into in your work and explore it, move around, get into all the nooks and crannies. That's a lot more satisfying than just naming a whole bunch of stuff going on. Embers by E.J. Fish is the fifth and final book in the Ziva Paven series, an adult military sci-fi police sci-fi. They're Black Ops. It's a Black Ops team. I'm not sure where in the midst of police or military that is, but Ziva and her group have to do a lot of stuff to keep their planet of aliens safe. They are Ephesians, which they're mostly humanoid with like some differences. They can go longer without eating. They have a specific coloring and such, but they're basically like souped up humans. Regardless, this series tackles terrorists and mobs, and it's so angsty. It's so melodramatic. Book 1 follows the new member of the crew, Araska, joining, except he doesn't know. He does not know that Ziva is the sniper that assassinated his brother, because Araska's brother was falsely accused of a crime that in their world would have accounted for assassination, and she did the job before it was discovered that it was wrongful. So it's so angsty. It's so this book in general is so angst. Such the slowest of burn romances. Like, I think it takes them several books for him to even realize his feelings, and she's even slower on the uptake. Ziva definitely is one of those, it is a disgrace to need someone. You should never have needs that other people must help you meet. Like, she's poor little girl. She's got family issues. She's got issues with her secret powers that are illegal, but like she low-key loves them anyway, and that kind of gets her in trouble sometimes. The author explained to me that they had the first 3 books that were all almost like a trilogy, but not exactly. They do have a fairly gigantic ending, cliffhangery ending, or I guess at least an up in the air one. And then books 4 and 5 were originally supposed to be one, but the author thought it was too long and so split it. And she was like so apologetic about the ending. It might not feel like an ending, and and I read it and I was like, no, that was just a cliffhanger ending. Like, it's fine. It was just a cliffhanger, and this one picks up like literal minutes later. You know, we're stumbling bloody onto what could be a hostile ship, but we have to go finish the job. It was very good. A lot of big dramatic moments, and if you don't know anything else about me, I love me melodrama. I probably said that before. I don't know. I've already been filming for several days in batches at this point, but I need the angst and the melodrama and the distress. And this one gives it in spades. Ziva is going through it. But also I love the side characters in her team are also really cute. I mean, well, not like cute and like they're not adorable. They're still Black Ops agents, but like, I love the dynamic. I don't know how much I would call it found family. I feel like that gets thrown around way too often as a word. I feel like that's just, we can just let them be like a team. And they are. They're a very good team. And I do believe this is supposed to be the final book. I was wondering, but like, I just went and like read the last page. And I was like, no, that's the final line of a final book. Like, that's very definitive in its ending, even though, again, a lot of the other books, aside from the ending of book 4, were also very fairly definitive in their endings. So this is definitely one for, you're gonna have to want the tactician. We have to go infiltrate the compound to save the people. We have to go do, we have to go have a negotiation with this mob boss. That kind of stuff. There's a lot of like guns. I can't remember if they're all like plasma sci-fi blasters or if there are like some more regular guns. I do not remember off the top of my head, but Ziva is very deadly. Very, like, obviously she's so good at her job, she completed the assassination before she realized she wasn't supposed to do it. But I also did like a good slow burn. Love the slow burn. Show me the angst and the pining. Yes, thank you. And Araska is forced to do so much pining in this book. Ziva's so good at some things and such a dumbass in others. It's great. Hands of the Carver by Laura Diaz de Arce is the sequel to Mask of the Nobleman, an East of the Sun, West of the Moon retelling, which, if you know the folktale, you'll probably have a decent idea of where I'm going with this. It follows the sculptor of wood named Petra as she is appointed by a local duke to come to his chateau, manor house, castle. What does a duke have? I don't know. But to do some art around the estate. And rumor has it that the duke was horrifically burned as a child, and that's why he never lets anyone see any inch of his skin. He is covered head to toe with a mask, like the title. But things start to get a little romantic between them. She still can't see any part of him, but she starts to grow closer to him and starts to wonder about his secrets. Now, if you know anything about the folktale East of the Sun, West of the Moon, I'm pretty sure that's its title. I always get the directions mixed up. You already know where this ends. It ends exactly where you think it would for a cliffhanger ending of the first book of a retelling. But if you don't know, I'm not going to go into any more depth because I know it's a lesser known folk tale, so you might still get surprised by the ending. But this author, Laura Diaz de Arce, has trouble remembering that she's one of my exception authors, because when I was first asking her about this new book, she was like, well, it's kind of fairy tale-esque, magical realism-y. I know that's not your bag, so you don't have to take it to review. And Laura is honestly the closest friend I've made from reviewing indie authors. Sorry, Travis. So I just, I so kindly, so gently told her, bitch, if you don't send me that book, because you don't get it out. You have to send me every book you write. And yes, this is not entirely my wheelhouse, but she just, she always puts in some queer characters. The first book, well, she's in both books, but she's more in the first book, has a disaster bisexual baroness that comes to visit who loves women so much that her father has ordered all of her handmaidens, the ladies in waiting, to wear veils because she'll be so attracted to them, she'll try to seduce them, and he hates that, so they have to be veiled. Love it. Love her. Iconic. But the first one does end on that. You will know it if you know the folktale ending, but it will probably be surprising to you if you don't. And this one, now that the mystery is revealed, we got to go do the thing. We solved out what the problem was. Now we got to go do something about the thing. And of course, there's pining, and there's separated lovers trying to come back. It's so good. I love it so much. This one also does a lot more with world building of the magic system. We get a little bit more into the antagonist. I did want a little bit more. Just, it doesn't have to be a total hokey villain monologue. I mean, I do love me a villain monologue, but it doesn't have to be that. I wanted a little bit more. And like I said, this isn't totally my jam, although I will say for my part, it goes a little bit more into direct fantasy than just magical realism, because this is kind of that ye olden times. It doesn't give an exact era, but it's very clearly pre-electricity. So it feels more like a standard fantasy than a magical realism, although there are still that fairy tale elements, but it's fairy tale elements with queer people. So I'm fine. I'm good. But overall, I would definitely suggest this one. If you like that kind of thing, or if you like East of the Sun, West of the Moon retellings. It is still a fairly wide genre of retellings, but not nearly as much as some of the more mainstream folk tales. So this is probably one that you can still get a lot out of. I still want to see people play with it a little bit more. I don't know, maybe make the woman be the one that has to be all mashed up, But regardless, thank you for the disaster bisexual as always, Miss D'Arce. The Silent Forest by David Dwayne Comer is the sequel to House on the Hill, a summertime haunted house mystery, except the horrors don't really stay to the house itself. This house sits above this tiny town, and it seems to spread out in small, minute ways and cast a pall over the entire place. Of course, we have our very small rural town setting that did feel pretty realistic to me as someone who has lived in fairly small towns, the one town I graduated high school from. There was a cornfield in town, like next to major businesses, businesses, cornfield, rural. So it felt accurate, felt right on there. But also we follow a family of parents and two kids, and there is not overt themes of racism, but they are one of the only interracial families in town. And the wife, Naomi, does talk about how I don't think I'm as welcome as you think I am, Cliff. But they do have two kids, and I specifically like the daughter Kaya, the older daughter. She's fun. Yeah, sure, I'm gonna give a little spoiler, but only because this is the kind of spoiler that makes me want to read a book more. And I feel like if you're watching my channel, you're probably similar. And that is Kaya begins to realize that her feelings for her best friend might not be so best friend feelings, might be a little different than best friend feelings. So, happy Pride. But regardless, I did really like the creepiness and just the way that the tension kind of seeped into things in the whole town, and how once things start happening and it is connected back to the house, people start panicking and they start blaming the newcomers, the new family that's yeah, low-key kind of creepy, but are they creepy in a creepy way, or are they creepy in a neurodivergent way? I'm thinking the latter. but I just work in special ed. So there is that element of everyone's tense. Everyone's looking for someone to blame for the crimes that are happening, the disappearances that are happening, and they're lashing out at people they should not be lashing out at. And this second book in the trilogy just kind of increases. Nothing is completely solved here. There's still all these mysteries about what happens inside that house. You actually don't get a lot inside the house in both books so far. There's really only short spans at the very end, which I think is pretty brilliantly done, because if you're going to make this a trilogy, you don't want to show the hand entirely right away, right? You want to be like, okay, I give you a sneak of how creepy it is, but characters either don't see things clearly or they don't remember things clearly, so it doesn't really stick. But I'm pretty sure, I think it's safe to say that we're going to get a lot of the house in book 3. I think so. Some promises were made, and I'm like, we're going to see a lot more of the inside of those horrors moving forward, which I do like. And just in general, it's very nice creepiness. You do see how the tension is starting to get to the family, because you have Cliff, who is determined to be, the best farmer he can be and not essentially being very attentive to his family. And the son is starting to pull away, and there's mysterious side characters. Where did they come from? We're not quite sure, but we think they're connected to the house. But does that mean they're victims and survivors, or part of the house's tension, part of its evil? You don't know. So I am expecting a fairly big ending come book 3. I don't have it yet. But, my inbox is open. It's not. I have so much. By the time you're seeing this, I hope that I have tackled my review list way farther. But right now, as I film this, it's not great. Grave Cold by Shannon Knight is a new adult sci-fi fantasy all about a woman named Kate who is living in futuristic Portland in a world in which everything went to hell in a handbasket, and now the United States is essentially made up of a bunch of separate city-states. And she is, believes herself to be genetically modified with a genetic modification that might be dangerous to the community, so she has to be followed by these two GM police people. Only JK, and this was in the synopsis, so it does not count as a spoiler, she's not genetically modified. She's a necromancer. It's in her blood. No modifications needed. And now she must team up with this seemingly ageless person named Niall to figure out what is happening to the city's dead. Because while it's part of Niall's job to escort souls, no souls are coming out of Portland anymore, and they've had to figure out what's happening to the city's perished. And I really liked this concept. I really liked this idea. There was a little bit of struggle with the world building in that the genetically modified part didn't seem to matter all that much. Like, pretty early on, Kate realizes that she's not a GM, she's actually this other thing, so it's dropped, and at no point do they need the GM thing to continue. They never have a problem that needs a GM to be solved. They just go about their day once they realize that she's not. And also the GM police that are following her around that are supposed to be antagonists, I think they're not really. She pushes them around pretty easily. At one point she bullies one into letting them do their hair because she works in a salon, and they do favors for her. They're not really antagonistic at all. And that was part of the issue a lot of times, where it seemed like no other character in the story really wanted to be a big obstacle for them to overcome. Even once they find out what's happening to the city souls, everyone just believes them pretty easily, even when it sounds pretty unbelievable if you didn't have the evidence, or they just kind of step aside. They know what Niall is and automatically like him, and so they give him whatever they need. There seems to be very few actual oppositions that they have to work to overcome. It seems like everyone's just stepping aside for them. And even in the bigger antagonists, the big bads, the ones that are whispered, and you know me, I love a good corrupt government official, corrupt CEO antagonist. They're built up to be really big, but even they don't feel very hard to overcome. And it could be the fact that this is a standalone, and one of the issues where the bigger you build the issue, the harder it is to conclude satisfyingly in one issue, because this is a deep government corruption, late-stage capitalism bullshit plot full of deep-seated corruption that has already taken gigantic amounts of lives, and it's everywhere. The story seems to conclude that everything will be fine now, and it's way too happy an ending for what the story set up. And I think I've talked about this before in this video already, but like, you should not default to a happy ending just to have a happy ending. The ending should match the story. And if you set up a giant systematic problem and your entire plot is just a couple people working for, I don't remember how long this takes place, like a couple weeks to a couple months, that's not enough to solve the entire systemic issue. And I know it's fiction, and like, oh, fiction, just let it be fiction. But no, people honestly think that that's how quickly you can solve actual systemic issues, IRL. And that's why they get pissed when, like, you know, the BLM summer of 2020 didn't magically solve all racism. Like, actual systemic change of huge societal issues requires years to decades of little wins adding up to a big win. And so this super happy ending that this book had for the level of issue it brought up, look, I want to be a naive, idealistic person, but this was too much for even me to stretch. But the one shining moment that I saw, which was mentioned in the acknowledgments by the author, was the necromancer system, the necromancer ravens system. And the author talked about how they actually studied like ancient necromancy techniques that like the spiritualists and healers back then would have used, and it shows. Like, it was incredibly well done, which I think was part of the reason why the other world building bothered me because like, I know what it looks like when this author can do it well, and so the world building that gets dropped or is rushed to a happy ending that the world building is not set up for, that frustrates me just like a little bit more. So I would be interested to see this author's work in a more standard high fantasy setting where they get to have the more spiritualist stuff. But this one, well, nice concept. I did love the reveal of what was happening to the souls. Didn't hit quite the bullseye for me. Time Marked Warlock by Shami Stovall is the first in its series of urban fantasy where our grumpy retired detective Adair Finch has insisted that he's out of the game. He can't go back. But then a terrified 12-year-old girl shows up on his doorstep announcing that her mother has just been murdered and her father kidnapped, and she needs his help to get to the bottom of it. Now, this has definitely Who Framed Roger Rabbit vibes, because we do have Adair, who was once in a detective agency with his brother, and his brother was the much more idealistic one and then died in the middle of a case. And so Finch wants nothing to do with it, but he can't quite bring himself to turn Bree away because he knows it's not what his brother would have wanted from him. Now, I particularly loved the magic system in here, specifically the time travel powers, because time travel powers are so iffy in stories, because if you're not careful, you can so easily open yourself up to a gigantic amounts of plot holes with, you know, well, why didn't they just travel back in time and solve that problem? But Finch's powers can only work over a 24-hour period. He marks the time, hence the title, and he can only travel back to that point up to 24 hours in the future. So he marks it first thing after he meets Bree, and then from any point 24 hours hence, he can restart the day and try again. But if it hits 24 hours, the mark will automatically dissolve and he has to set a new one, and therefore cannot go back anymore. And I did like that, because that means that there's not going to be any plot points. He can't go back and save Bree's mom because he didn't make the next mark until after he found out about it, so he can't do anything about it. And also, there is that element of we have to figure this all out in a day because certain antagonists are on the move, and if they don't, like if they wait till it gets to the next 24-hour point, certain antagonists will get away. And so it is very much a Groundhog's Day vibe where they have to keep reliving the same day over and over again. At one point, they have this big battle with someone that Finch can't beat without knowing what they're going to do, so they just have to keep going back again and again so we can get a little bit further in the battle the next time and a little bit further. But there is a greater magic system because Shami Stovall loves herself a very drawn out magic system, almost based on, when I was trying to remember, I thought they were chakras, but no, it's 5 like ports essentially where you make pacts with different creatures or beings in this world, and depending on what port you make a pact with, if it's, I forget, like crowns, so like head, eyes, heart, loins, I'm missing one but one of those that will decide the strength of the pact, the strength of the power you get from it, and what it looks like. So if you make a deal with the same deity for eyes versus crown, you're going to get different abilities for each. And I like that thing where it gives you a lot to play with. Like, oh, this gnome gives one little change for this one, but then if you made a different pact with that same gnome, you get different power. But the pacts also have greater sacrifices and greater asks based on what port you use. So I did like that concept. I have a feeling we're going to see more of it. But our young girl Bree is actually a witch, which means she doesn't have to do any of that. Warlocks have to make the pacts. That is such an annoying word to say. She has to make the deals. She doesn't have to make the deals that Finch does to get her power. She'll just come into them when she is eventually of age. But she already wants them. Adair has to tell them, like, no, stop trying to make deals with these beings. You will come into your own magic. Just wait. And of course, she is, despite being a grieving child, is much more like, what's this do? What's this do? And like annoying her with her surprising sunshine energy, considering what's just happened to her. And I love a good apathetic character learns to care again. I love Who Framed Roger Rabbit too. It's great. And the only real issue that I can think of with this one was there was kind of a fake out. Like, you thought the problem was way bigger than it was, and it wasn't. And that reveal doesn't always work well in reverse. Like, yeah, the reveal of this problem is much bigger than you thought, it's always fun. But the reverse of, oh, is this a big problem? No, just a couple dudes. It was just a couple dudes making it look like it was a bigger problem. That's a little bit more of a letdown. But still, I highly enjoyed it. I am interested to see what the author can do with that world building moving forward and the magic system. And I like that the little characters and the relationship forming between our grumpy old detective and his new apprentice. Like, it was so cute. I love it so much. But that's another series from this author that I'm working on. I'm gonna lose count. Be the Sea by Clara Ward is a futuristic nautical sci-fi following a nearly 70-year-old non-binary person named Wend as they seek out other people like themselves. Ever since they were a child, they had these astral projection dreams. I'm just going to call them astral dreams because that phrase is annoying, where they would find themselves literally in the body of a sea creature. And they discovered over the years that anyone born near their birth date, either a couple days before or after in that same year, also had similar dreams. And not only that, they also discovered that there were also other birthday clusters, people born around a certain time, that would also have them. And when they discovered that this underwater photographer is around their age exactly, they make up an excuse to get on the boat and go with them across the sea. And while on the way, they discover a thing that is bad. I'm not gonna lie, I fixated more on the astral dreams because the actual conflict of this technology bad went right over my head. It's plastic eating bacteria, and that is bad for a reason. I don't know any more than that. There's a lot of talk about eco-friendly techniques and eco-tech. So this is very clearly the author's hyperfixation. There's a lot of neurodivergent rep, and your girl has also taken the selfie evals, and I'm not on the spectrum, but now's a really bad time to try to get a formal on-paper diagnosis, so we're pushing it back. Regardless, definitely is their hyperfixation, in that nearly every conversation with every single character would devolve into long, in-depth scientific discussions on stuff like squid genetics and natural heating and cooling, which is fun, but it kind of made a lot of the characters sound like each other. Like, it was hard to differentiate when at any point anyone was going to be getting into these topics with the same level of depth. Kind of made it hard to differentiate. But once they hit land on this island, Wend wants to start tackling the issue of the bad technology they discovered. Okay. And while there, they also discover a polycule led by a person they were besties with in preschool. And apparently, preschool besties are for life because they're now both nearing 70 and still want to be besties again, having never stopped thinking about each other in over 6 decades, which, damn it, I want someone that's thinking about me over 6 decades despite not only being around me when I was 4. But the thing with the polycule is that it very clearly was meant to be a found family, but so much of the polycule doesn't do anything for the story. Like, there's like 3 of them that are, you know, taking an active part in the things going on, and then everyone else is basically just there for crowd scenes, essentially. So I'm not sure why it wasn't just pared down to focus on that polycule, and then everyone else Wen was bringing up, because they do reconnect with another from their past. And I liked the concept in theory. However, just the overall emphasis on these gigantic scientific discussions slowed everything down to a crawl. The synopsis hints at this conspiracy against the scientists, but it wasn't really anything. They quote unquote attack Wen with bureaucracy stumbling blocks and paperwork that they have to do, and it's solved pretty quickly. Moreover, this story seems more like an excuse to talk about squid genetics and ecotech, and also a walking simulator, because a lot of this is a futuristic world where they're just enjoying a essentially solar punk but nautical vibe. I guess solar punk is not inherently not nautical. When I think solar punk, I think of, you know, the cities covered in greenery, but I guess there could be solar punk nautical books. But the weird thing is that while, you know, all the characters spoke the same, they also felt really young. Like, these characters are, the youngest is in their mid-20s, and everyone else is like 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. So these should be reading like aged people of some kind. You know, queer aged people, yes, but queer elders are still a thing. They're still going to speak a little differently than people half their age. But there was so much, like, almost an uncomfortable amount of reverence for specifically millennials, and implying that millennials were like the arbiters of the gender queer movement, which, like, no, Kate Bornstein and Marsha P. Johnson, you know, are and were not millennials. We might have popularized a lot of the aspects that former generations created or upheld from their ancestral beliefs, depending on what culture you're talking about, but millennials didn't start shit. We popularized it, and then I think we can see Gen Z picking up the ball and running with it. But there was just like, okay, like, no, millennials weren't the only ones doing stuff, okay? Little too much reverence for a specific generation, with like a more broader context. Thank you. When we're talking queer history. I really hate the idea that like gender queer people are such a super modern concept when they're really not. Like, when freaking Louisa May Alcott is talking about feeling like a man born in a woman's body, like, nah. Also, fun fact, did you know that? I was tickled pink when I found that one. Regardless, cool concepts. At this point, I think I'd rather just see the author just write a nonfiction. I can crush a nonfiction. Those are my reading slump breakers. The Ghost Shock and the One-Eyed Dragon by Leela Mina is the prequel to the author's Temper Saga, and it's a little bit difficult to explain how without spoiling things, because the Temper Saga is set in contemporary Japan, and this book is set in feudal Japan, many centuries prior. Suffice to say, the series has a lot of paranormal aspects. If you've read it, you probably have an idea of what this is about, but yeah, so just be on the lookout for some more speculative elements if you read that. Although there's not many speculative elements in this one particularly. This follows Kyoko, who is a rather unorthodox warrior in that she is a woman and is actually really interested in these newfangled gun things and has trained a bunch of other women to use them well. And while she's on the battlefield against a rival clan, she gets the leader of the rival clan in her sights. But then he turns and they make eye contact, and she suddenly can't make herself take the shot for some reason. Something seems to be staying her hand. And then her clan loses. And in a last-ditch attempt to prevent her clan's entire annihilation, she sneaks in to the rival leader's tent while he's getting railed by his underling, because yes, this is a buy for buy MF. We love to see it. Happy Pride. But she proposes that if they marry, he can get the clan's family lands, the outside ones that, like, not that their house is sitting on, and access to all of her trained markswomen with these newfangled guns. And in return, he lets her family live. And surprisingly, he goes for it. Not just a marriage, but an open marriage. She can have her lovers too, because yes, she is also a chaos bisexual. They agree to this. Kyoko's family is not thrilled about it, but Date is hot, so we'll go with it. And they start traveling back to his manor house. What do they call it? I don't know. There is a glossary for all of the Japanese terms and honorifics and all of that. But it's not such smooth sailing because a lot of Kyoko's family clan is not happy with the deal and would like to try certain things to stop them. There's also a fun part because this is very erotic. Which, if you have read the original series, that's not surprising to you. But Kyoko essentially says, okay, we can have some fun, but no actual, full penetrative sex until we are married. So Date cannot, I think Date's not allowed to get off at all, I think is the deal. To it's basically a giant edging. But it's effective. Okay. The author knows what she's doing with sexual tension. And this one was surprising to me because I usually hate enemies to lovers, actual enemies to lovers, because, call me Mr. Darcy, but my good opinion once lost is lost forever. Okay. If I ever get to the point where I actually genuinely hate someone, which is very rare for me, but if I do, that's lifetime, baby. we don't change that. But this one, I think it worked a little better because Date had reason to want to attack Kyoko's clan because his father had been their captive and had died in captivity, and there was reason to believe that the honor code around treating captives was not followed. And so a lot of this is just honor code stuff. Honor demands that he take revenge for his father's death, and honor demands that Kyoko fight for her family clan. So there's this kind of element of, they were technically enemies, but it wasn't personal, and their direct face-to-face interactions were not nearly as hostile, again, because she literally finds him in full, what's the word? Delicto, flagrante delicto. Ha! I remembered my 5-cent word for the day. But I think that helped in creating a much more amenable situation where it didn't feel like anyone was really against their will. The fact that she came up with the deal herself, she wasn't given away. She goes, oh, I'm going to make this for the betterment of everybody, even if they're too stupid to realize that they need this, because her family is still trying to go to war again. And she's like, no, that was dumb and also dishonorable, because they agreed when the clan leaders went toe-to-toe that whoever won, they would accept that as winning the war, essentially. So that helped. It felt like not quite a full enemies to lovers. And also, it's two chaos bisexuals, and I know what comes later. If you have read the Temper Saga, I am sorry, you will not see the full polycule here, which I know was my favorite part. But the foursome will not be in this one. It's just the twosome for now. But there is a vague reference to it, and you could always just go reread the Temper Saga, although the polycule doesn't fully form until the later stage books, but you know what? It's worth the wait. Wyvern's Plague by A.K. Bryce is a fantasy standalone following Iris, a street rat who suddenly realizes she can turn into a wyvern. She didn't know she could do that before, but everybody saw it happen. And now she is approached by a wyvern shifter nobleman who wants her to pretend to be his illegitimate daughter. He is childless, and he's got political allies ready to swoop in and take everything he's built up if he can't find someone to rule in his stead. So our young street rat must learn how to be a noblewoman and a dragon shifter all at once, and also a fighter, because war is on the horizon. This is a world of dragon racism. Admittedly, it was a little bit on the nose at time, and the dragon supremacists are trying to conquer everyone they see as lesser, and it's a whole system based on can your kind fly? How lizard-like are they? There's a lot of dragon shifters that are considered lesser, and wyverns are up there, but not quite the tippy top. And I really liked the classic timid character growing into be a more confident person, even if it wasn't always smooth. Because this is a standalone, there's a lot of time jumps just to get everything done in the span of a single book. So Iris will jump ahead in confidence a lot. It'll be like, oh yeah, for the last 3 months she's been practicing her flying, and now she's so much better at it and so much more confident about it. But what I like the most about this book is how hard the author was willing to go, because I'm not gonna lie, at this point, hearing that there's a war in a fantasy book is kind of never mind to me, because so many characters are given plot armor, and I know so many characters aren't actually going to suffer that much that it's like, yeah, it's like war nominally, but like I'm not actually going to worry about it. But here, a lot of stuff goes wrong, and no compunction against killing off named characters. Several named characters. The adorable side ones, they can all die. They can all die off page while the character is blacked out from plague. Because yes, a plague has been making the rounds around the nation, kingdoms, for a while now, and they do come back during the war. So bad times all around. But there was also a lot of hard decisions where basically Iris has to look at what she wants and give it up to benefit the people she is now ruling. She can't follow her personal heart because she has to make the formal allies. She has to make the arranged marriages. And I honestly thought that the book was going to like pull oh, nope, never mind. She can have her way anyway. But she sticks to it. She has to pick certain things, and her ending is very bittersweet. I mean, the ending for everybody's bittersweet. Again, it's war, but she is forced to and sticks to those important leadership decisions, and I really liked that. This book it understood the assignment. It's like, hey, we're not going to set up a plague and a war and all these political maneuvers and not have it mean something. And there's such a complex relationship between Iris and her fake father and Iris and everybody else because she's not acting like the way a noble woman is supposed to. I mean, it's so complex, and there's a lot of talk about the flying and her fake father's dead wife, who he has to essentially pretend to have cheated on, even though he loved her dearly, and this is causing a whole bunch of problems with her family to pretend to have cheated on her earlier. So there's just so much juicy angst in it, and drama, and Iris trying to maintain her humbleness from her roots, but still be the noble woman they need her to be. But most importantly, I love this book for its importance to me because this was the last book I'd read before I hit TBR 0. So that means that at one point in time, this was the singular only book that I owned that I had not read in my entire collection. And it was the last thing I had to read before I could hit 0. So I think I'm always going to view this book at least somewhat positively because of that, just because it was the last one. And I could have backed out because I found out when I went to read it that I had never actually told the author that I was going to read it. I had gotten the email. I had thought to myself, oh, I'm going to read that. And then forgot to formally accept it. And so part of me was like, oh, well, I could just, delete it and say that I didn't. Like, no. I was a good kid. I said, hey, I meant to say yes to this forever ago. Can I still get a copy? And I got it and I read it and then I hit 0. Okay. I was an honorable kid. And this was just a nice way to finish that challenge. The Casino Job by Jennifer R. Donahue is the 7th book in the Run with the Hunted series, a set of sci-fi heist novellas following a trio of thieves as they go after whatever new fancy thing they're going after. This time it is a set of diamond-encrusted statues in the middle of a casino lobby made to look like endangered animals. Why do they want them? Just for the money. They have very high cost tastes at this point. Now, admittedly, this POV is not my favorite because the series cycles through each character getting to have their own POV, and Bristol is the more social brains of it. She's got all the charisma, and she's very much darling and very particular on the clothes and the perfume and everything, which is like the farthest thing from my vibe. She also is the one that kind of has the most trouble connecting to the other two. The other two are much more close friends rather than with her. My second favorite is Dolly, who is the, black t-shirt, camo, combat boots, bronze of the whole set, who's been through it. And then, of course, you have my fave, who is the tech genius Bits, who may or may not, definitely does have a caffeine addiction. And she's just so daydreamy. It reads so close to me. This series works really well as novellas. I don't usually read novellas a lot, but because these are highly episodic and fast-paced and tense, it works well in the shorter format. I will say that I really like how closer they're getting over the course of the series, because in the first couple books, they just felt like teammates. You know, they work well together, they can steal the expensive stuff, split the money, and then they'll go months without even speaking to each other, which, like, yeah, part of that is to not get caught, but this is where you really see, after some intense things that happened, they realize, oh, maybe we do need each other than more to just steal stuff. There was one specific scene between Dolly and Bristol, and Jennifer, I know you watch these videos and I know you know what I'm talking about, and thank you. I feel like that was just for me. Twirling my hair, kicking my feet, squealing. I love it. But this one as a whole, the plot was actually a little bit more of a blow off, because right before this book, some gigantic stuff went down. And so this one definitely felt more like just a deep breath and a decompress after that. So as a result, it didn't feel as notable, aside from that one scene, the twirling the hair and the squealing and the kicking the feet. So I am excited to see it pick back up again now that we've had our breath of fresh air, our little relief. And also, I really want to see where certain things go. Hint, double hint, Miss Donahue. If you want to give me more of that, I'm not upset. Regardless, I don't know how long the series is going to get, but I'm pretty sure we're at least going to break double digits at this point. Devil by the Tail by Carolyn Lavoie is a queer YA horror set in Alaska following a snowy mountain. Well, it's not always snowy. This book takes place over the course of a year, where a demonic entity resides, brought over by the colonizers. And this entity can curse you for a loved one to die. And our friend Alex, who has just recently begun a rather messy relationship with the new girl Amka, decides she has to go up the mountain and defeat this thing once and for all. Now, that is the gist I got from the synopsis when I first read it. However, the story is much more YA than horror. Queer YA, to be fair, but the majority of the runtime is much more spent on high school drama. And to be fair, I don't read a lot of YA. I'm pretty sure I've talked about that before in this video. But queer YA horror seems to be like the one last vestige of YA that I can read and get into. But this one, I felt so old. I felt my age, because I'm reading the way these teenagers are treating each other. And I'm like, can someone take them to the counselor? Please, can someone call their parents? Like, they were awful to each other. The relationship is so toxic. They're keeping secrets. Alex spends way more of her time being upset over things Amka does or doesn't do than in love with her. And they both have other people they have some kind of romantic interest in, and they treat those people terribly. Like, it's just, I didn't want them to end up together. And like, I am a chaos bisexual. Check the nails. Happy Pride. But they were terrible. There are other pretty girls in the world for you. Go. Go find one of them. And it was hard, because that's the whole crux of this is, you know, this romance was like the hinge point of it. And I'm like, I don't want it to keep happening. I will say I love this setting. This is definitely one of those books where the setting is a character in itself, and you know, up on the mountain in a dark, cold winter night with the howling winds, and there's an entity among the trees. Like, that was very well done. I like the tension. I just wish there was more of that. I wish there was more of the creepiness, because you have the, you know, rural house, maybe with the snowmobile that's broken down, so escape wouldn't be very easy, and it's alone and creaking in the night. Like, it's the perfect setting for a horror. I just wish there was more horror than YA. There's also supposed to be a kind of character arc for Alex, because she has cut people out of her life before now, just because her mother left when she was very young, and she still doesn't understand why, and it is revealed why over the course of the story. But as a result, she tends to push people away. And I think the idea is to make it look like she doesn't have anybody else that she loves that the chat cornu could take away, so it would have to be Amka. But like, no, she still does. Like, her dad has to leave town for work a lot, but they still have a pretty healthy relationship, and she has her bestie that she dicks around a lot. He is that all-American himbo and gets pulled around by her a ton. So she has other people that love her. So I'm not sure why the toxic high school relationship that's causing all the drama would be the like impetus, the incentive, the catalyst for all of this to happen and need to be taken care of. I also wish the Chat Cornu, I wish it had either been more mysterious or more explained, because it was kind of like this middle ground of they invented new rules for what it could do based on what they needed to be scary. So I either wish it was like, don't give me any exposition, total non-entity, they don't have any idea, they're going into this totally blind, aside from the curse, they know nothing else, or give me the exact rules and powers and what's at stake. I wish there had been one or the other, because that kind of middle road made it seem like the rules were just there to give characters an out or to suddenly turn them and make the entity more scary when it needed to be. But that's just me. Part of my coping mechanisms with the horror is to get really in depth in like the logical side of it to keep myself from being creeped out. But in general, I do like the idea of an invasive demonic entity, like a supernatural analog for all of the real terrible shit colonizers brought over with them, like actual invasive species, like diseases. Like, I would love to see more of that idea, indigenous authors creating colonizer demonic entities. That could be a lot of fun to play with in the horror space, I think. Someone get Stephen Graham Jones on that. But regardless, definitely not my vibe. I don't do a lot of YA anymore, but if you love messy YA high school drama, this one would probably be right up your alley. The Tenor's Shadow by J.B. Warwick is a queer paranormal romance, and it was the first review of 2025. Yes, I am finally within the same calendar year that I am filming all this. Still got a lot to go. Regardless, yes, I did begin my year with a queer romance. I am who I am, but this follows a operatic tenor named Anthony, or Antonio, as his fans know him, as he is increasingly getting like weird, threatening messages. He tells his uncle about it. Uncle tells his new husband, really want that prequel story, and husband sends over a bodyguard. But unbeknownst to Anthony Antonio, uncle married into a vampire coven, and new bodyguard is also a vampire, and the gay pining starts almost immediately. And everyone, say it with me, gay pining is superior. Yes, so they begin to fall more and more into feelings, and Freddie is caught up in all of these extra like tough feelings, and fun reveal, this is a fated mates universe. I do wish we'd gotten a little bit more of that ahead of time, because I feel like the pining hits harder when you know it's fated mates and the human is oblivious. But overall, I was gearing up to love this book. Perfect 5-star. Like, I broke review rules for this book, because usually I only read review books in very certain settings because I'm doing stuff like this. But this one, I was so into it. I was downloading it on my phone so I could take it while we were going out to eat, because I wanted to keep reading like that much. It was going to be a perfect glittering 5-star. And then... And then Anthony made a dumb bitch decision. Now, I am not against dumb bitch decisions. I have made an entire video essay on defense of the dumb bitch trope. Yes, it will be linked down below. The thing is that you have to be really careful with a dumb bitch decision, because you don't want it to be obvious that they're doing this decision just to advance the plot. And this one definitely felt like that. And obviously, I don't want to get very deep into it, but essentially, Antonio knows he's in danger, right? He's got it. He is, at this point in the story, he's aware vampires are real. He's aware there's like, vampires gunning for you. And he still makes a dumb bitch decision for the sake of his career. The story had never set him up to being like super greedy or overly ambitious before now. So to have him purposely make the dumbest decision to put himself in danger for the sake of his career didn't make a lot of sense. And again, but that makes him look overly greedy and ambitious to the extent that he would pick his career over possible death. And I wish that had been like more built into his character, that he was more obsessive over his career or more obsessive over moving forward. Like, yeah, he is kind of upset with where he is in his career, but not enough to risk his life. So it just felt like such an obvious, we are doing this to make danger and make the plot get more exciting. Like, that was my frustration. There was a couple cool reveals ahead of time. I wish there had been a little bit more setup for them, because there's a very cool reveal of an antagonist you didn't know. And I feel like if they had set up the concept of that antagonist, like, oh, did you know that this person has this connection to this other mysterious person that we haven't seen in a while? Like that kind of stuff would have made the reveal of the antagonist is here a little bit more dramatic and feel a little bit more, I don't know, like impactful. Let's go with that. But overall, it was still very good and steamy as far as a romance went. Gay pining abounds. It did the favorite, my favorite, and the favorite of Octavia E. Butler's, I believe, where the vampire bite feels very pleasurable. I just read Fledgling, so I have that in my head. But woman agrees that the vampire bites are more fun when they're pleasurable for the bite donor. Whatever. So, as much as the Leroy Jenkins for the plot thing annoyed me, still a great steamy pick for paranormal romance lovers, especially the gay ones. Songs of a Befuddled Muse by Willem Cohen Kierley is a collection of short stories as the author finally comes back to his writing. I was sent an audiobook, which is my favorite. It's been happening a little bit more lately, but if I can get an audiobook, I love it. I've become more of an audiobook girly, but regardless, Liz May Bryce, the narrator, did do a fantastic job just slightly changing her tone in each story so to delineate it from the others, and I really liked that. But all of the stories together were very, individually, they each were excellent, right? There were so many stories that I kind of had a moment in, and that was really good. However, the curation of them all together in this collection was whiplash. It was a little bit whiplash. Just the sheer change in themes. You would do like one that was like, here's horrific war crimes against women and children, and here's a fun story about a clown private eye, and you're like like there was just a lot of that like whiplash back and forth of a horrific story mixed with a lighthearted story. And it's not that I want every story to be terrible, but it definitely felt like this was the author just gathering up whatever they had around as a story rather than writing this collection together to be a collection with like a through line. But there was a 3-part story that in all honesty I think adds up to novella length about Lady Jane Grey and the time traveler that decides to save her from assassination. Now, if you didn't know, Lady Jane Grey was a very, very short-lived Tudor queen. I think she was queen for 9 days before she is removed and executed by Mary, who would go on to become Bloody Mary. But this historian time traveler, it just becomes obsessed with her, and he knows he's not supposed to interfere, but he can't help himself. He can't let her die. So he saves her from her execution, and that essentially changes a lot in the future. Like, they didn't realize how much her 9-day in execution helped with English history overall. And I wish there had been more done with that, just because the world they try to go back to in modern day England after saving her and what it looks like now was so interesting to me. The concept and the idea of what it became was so intriguing that I honestly I would do a full novel of that just to explore. But this is the historian in me speaking. Like, I have multiple degrees in this area. So you're going to make alternate history. You show me. Okay. I want to see every aspect of these centuries since that played out and how it would be different. Okay. Show me every little bit. But regardless, the only part of the audiobook that I really had trouble with was sometimes the sci-fi explanations of time travel kind of went over my head. And also the last short story in the collection, while having a great twist, loved the twist, is told in emails. And because it's an audiobook, the narrator had to read out the sender and recipient and timestamps of every single email. And I know there's really no way around that. It's just not my preferred way of taking in, found media, alternate media, mixed media. Words are leaving me today, man. But overall, a pretty good collection. Cozy Queer Erotica by Rory Thornton is a collection of short stories all about monster fucking. Queer monster fucking, if you couldn't guess that from the title. Each story has at least one sex scene and follows interactions between a human or humanoid partner and a very not humanoid partner. In some cases, multiple. There is group scenes. Admittedly, a lot of them were so very different that I had trouble figuring out who was where and in what position. A lot of talk about cloacas. And, I've never really done much with centaur erotica. So that one I was like, I don't know how this is working. But they all are still properly steamy. There were still some interesting sci-fi and fantasy concepts. I loved that sci-fi still had a place here because I think in a lot of anthologies and collections, the sci-fi stories can get kind of pushed to the side in favor of the fantasy a little bit. And I am a sci-fi lover. The only struggle that I had with the collection was the pieces. Well, the stories felt like pieces. They did not feel like whole standing works in and of themselves. They felt like something that was like taken out of a bigger story and put in here. A lot of it had to do with the world building. The world building would be very, very big. I think at one point I talk about how like there's this giant backstory about the history of human space travel when really all you needed to know was that humans were on this alien planet and someone was going to fuck an alien, which is really all you needed to know. For that story. But there were also moments where certain plot points that were brought up in the short story weren't necessarily resolved. And this was not one of those, open-ended thriller-esque collections where you weren't supposed to know. Like, I needed a little bit more resolution and a little bit more focus on the story themselves. It did remind me a little bit of a collection I had read earlier of authors who had basically just taken scenes or characters from other stories and wrote short stories for them to just advertised in this holiday collection, and it annoyed me so much when I figured out what was going on that I immediately deleted it and refunded it because I'm like, no, you're not using that to sell me other stuff. I don't think that's what's happening here. I don't think that's what the author did. As far as I can tell, they don't have any other work out, at least the last time I checked, and I didn't see anything coming out that would be something that these stories were from. I think it was just the extra world building and the unresolved plot points made it feel like it wasn't necessarily standing in itself. That being said, that's one of the hardest things to do with short stories. Make them feel whole and complete in and of themselves when they're so much shorter than a novel. So I can't hold that too much against any author. And it did what it needed to do. It was very steamy. It was very monster fuckery. So if you are one of the monster lovers, go forth and be horny with the horned. A Guide to Order by Alex Pendragon is a queer contemporary romance that I should not love as much as I do because I don't do a lot with contemporary books and I don't do a lot with high school books. They're both 18. It's okay. But this is essentially about a football player named Garrett who's got just like, he's just like really, he thinks a lot about the loner kid named Brady, the only out gay kid in school. And he just like really wants to get to know him better for no reason at all. And he discovers while they're in detention together that Brady is on this app where you can essentially put forth your services in making videos for people and they can ask you to do certain things in those videos. It's OnlyFans. It's OnlyFans, but like with more of a specific request system. And Garrett's like, oh, I'll just do it for the money. I could use more money, college and all that. And he gets on it. And lo and behold, someone asks for a scene of him and Brady. And they're paying a lot. So Garrett, who is still swearing he's straight at this point, mind you, says, like, why not? Let's just go for it. And realizations happen over the course of the story. Now, if I was a straight person or if I was one of those people that recognized my sexuality from a very young age, I might say that it's unrealistic. All of the things that Garrett does while swearing he's straight. Okay, it would sound weird. But I once had a very prolonged series of daydreams in which I imagined myself having a dark-haired girlfriend named Christine while swearing I was straight. And yes, it was Christine from Phantom of the Opera. Neither the Phantom nor Raoul deserved her. I could be so much better for her. Regardless, there is a lot that you'll do mental gymnastics wise when you're not prepared to admit certain things to yourself. So to me, Garrett's inability to realize he's not straight was not surprising, but the sex scenes were fun. Again, they're 18. I know that for some people that might be squickish enough to not want to even deal with that. And I'm pretty sure that this story wasn't originally written for characters in high school, because they make several references to phrases like back in high school or when I was in high school. So I think this was originally meant to be a college romance that got aged down. Obviously still old enough to be legal. Okay. But that it was just enough where I felt like I had to reread things because I got confused at those little typos. But it wasn't enough to really like mess anything up. As for any level of homophobia, there's not a lot on page. There's like one bully that makes some comments. Majority of it is discussed in, what's the word I'm thinking of? The abstract. In the abstract. There's not so much shown directly, and the ending is very happy for now. And in the author's note, they talk about how happy forever doesn't sound as realistic for the current climate, and they would prefer a happy for now. And also that goes to show that like you don't have to have that romance, that relationship last forever to still have been worthwhile. And you know, you really should focus on what you have now and not what could happen in the future. So regardless, very steamy, very fun, very kinky. I will say that there are certain acts that are asked of them with, they fully consent. The app does allow for you to be like, no, I don't want to do that. But there are certain moments where, you know, Garrett is supposed to be this very dominant jock stereotype, but on the inside he's panicking. What do I do? While he's supposed to be dominant. Like it was great camp. So it's not going to be everyone's cup of tea if you don't like the high school stuff, if you don't like the kink stuff, but if you do, you'll probably love this one. Frankie and Chair by Johan Engler is a middle grade contemporary or sci-fi fantasy, depending on how you choose to view it. This follows a young boy named Danny who is still reeling after the loss of his father. He and his mother have had to move to a new town so she can get a job when she never really had to work before. She could do her art full time, and so they're struggling with money, and he is struggling with change. But the way he gets through it is with his bestie, Chair. A talking chair named Chair. Now, obviously, Danny's the only one that can hear Chair. No one else hears him. No one else sees anything moving but him. So this is very clearly a coping mechanism. And also his coping mechanism is the comic book series that he is writing with Chair called, I'm going to forget here. Yes. The Adventures of Captain Redtail and Sir Winchester, a pair of space pirates who are a flying squirrel and a wooden robot respectively. And they are fighting against the evil Lord Forked Roar. And it's a lot of fun watching those sillier kid sci-fi moments. It very clearly looks like something a kid would make up. And it runs through the entire story. So something would happen in the contemporary story, and suddenly Sir Winchester and Captain Redtail have a new aspect, a new possible ally, or maybe a thief, or maybe a new reveal in the story. But in the real world, Danny goes to school and meets a girl named Frankie. Danny doesn't want to be friends with anybody because he doesn't want anything to change, and he's got his bestie, the talking chair. But Frankie is like, we're going to be friends anyway. Doesn't give him a say-so in it, but he does eventually start to warm up to the idea, but discovers that Frankie has some family issues of her own. This is definitely a story about loss and grief. This is a family that is not handling the grief well. Danny's mom, Tess, doesn't really know what to do about her son's weird imaginary friend comfort object. You know, she doesn't know what to do about it, but she's also not really telling him her feelings. Like, she's trying to do that whole, oh, it'll be okay, like not showing her that like she's grieving the loss of her husband too. But Danny does find an unfortunate comrade in Frankie and everything she is going through. And it is definitely an ending that things aren't okay yet. It is not an ending where they've automatically magically fixed everything, but more those endings where they've finally accepted the problem, that the problem is on them, and they are going to take the steps to remedy it. And you see the first few steps being taken at the end of the book. But really what I loved the most about the ending was during the climactic scene, you actually got like dual climactic scenes happening at the same time, where it would be like a scene in the real world and then a scene in the sci-fi comic, and it was flipped back and forth, of course very closely mirroring each other like how a child would view it, and Danny having to come to grips with, talking to a chair is not the best thing for him in the long term. That is a short-term coping mechanism you need to move on from, and I really liked that aspect. Like with most middle grade, the only thing I'm not sure of here is, of course, what specific age range it's for. Again, we have a very clear young demographic. We're talking 3rd to 4th grade in American terms, so that would be somewhere between 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, probably more closer to 8 to 10. But some of the wording is a little bit advanced. Now, that could be because the author is Swedish, and I'm willing to bet Swedish literacy levels are very high. Fun fact, America kind of is famously has been instituting very terrible reading curriculum for kids lately, and they've only recently started to go back because they realized you can't actually drop phonics as a major player in teaching children to read. It's rough out here, guys. As someone that works in elementary school, it's so rough. Regardless, I am willing to give the author the benefit of the doubt that, young Swedish children could probably read this in English better than American children could read it in their first language. Love how people are treating education these days. Regardless, still adorable. Still that kind of you gotta let go of your grief and move on aspect that even adults could enjoy. Mercy by Ian Haramaki is a 1920s alternate fantasy historical Eastern Europe. That sounds weird, but stick with me. Following a priest named Ilya as he is forced to go trudge off into the woods to face off this mystery creature that's been attacking people. Except, JK, it's actually a hot amnesiac named Danya, who doesn't remember how he ended up as the monster, but Ilya brings him back to it's not a parsonage, rectory? I think it's a rectory when it's Catholicism adjacent, and begins to nurse him back to health, and of course, feelings happen. But as they begin to uncover more of Danya's past and what happened to him, they begin to open a large can of worms of what the church has been up to and what this religion is actually all about. And I loved that aspect. The relationship between Ilya and Danya was definitely the best part, including the steamy scenes. Like, right on the altar, Danya? What would the mother say? It's definitely alternate. It is not directly Catholicism, even though it is very clearly meant to be somewhat similar to that. But we have Ilya, who as a priest is just fucking despised. I said in the review when I first wrote this out, it felt like being in the head of someone with generalized anxiety disorder, how like literally the entire universe is set on just hating him and making him feel hated. No one can talk about anything else. When he goes into town, no one's fucking talking about the weather or the crops or their own personal drama. No. It's all about how much they hate him. It's all about how they think he's secretly a murderer, that he secretly murdered someone as a child, and how much they hate him, and how much they liked his dad as a priest more than him, and how much they'll be happy to have a priest after him. But like, they have the ability to vote him out. Like, they as a church can be like, go, and they don't. Like, no one's going to church services, hasn't been going to church services for years. They're still believers in this religion. They don't hate the religion. No one's complaining about, like, the opulence of the temple or whatever, opulence of the church. They just hate him specifically. And like, yeah, the book tries to play it off like late game as, oh, their hatred of him is actually an extension of their disillusionment with the church. But no, there's no indication of that earlier. They don't go at all. And they can attack him. They can physically, violently harm him with no issue. No one even tries to get them in trouble for it. It's like, why is he still here? Why are you forcing him to be here when you still hate him? When you want a different priest, why are you just like waiting for him to die? It doesn't make any sense in that respect. And the idea that they were all just obsessed with their hatred of him and the extent to which violence can be enacted upon him, it just felt cartoonish. And I say that as someone who is the child of a pastor who ended up leaving the church because of disrespect. So I know what a clergyman being forced out of the religion looks like, and it's a lot more subtle than this. It's a lot more nuanced. Like, yeah, they will come to the church and constantly dig at you and ignore all of your teachings and fight back against any changes you make, because how dare you make us miss out on golf time on Sundays just to get younger families in the church. Like, I could go on a whole rant, but we won't here. So that was my biggest frustration, where the entire setting didn't feel real. It felt like it was all in Ilya's head. And I wish we'd also had more of the fantasy religion in itself, because it's based on, the son and the mother and a lot of these aspects. And you really only see Ilya giving like a short snippet of one sermon. I wanted more. I wanted more of the rituals and the teachings and the beliefs. Like, if you're going to give me fantasy religion, I want all the aspects, okay? I say this as a veiling pagan. I want all the juicy spiritual aspects, please. I really wanted more of that. But still, if you like angsty queer romances with, maybe slightly blasphemous sex scenes, this one will be right up your alley. Triple Strike Threads of Fate by G.M. Gray is a queer space opera, although I'm pretty sure that's redundant, following Alan, an investigator investigating space pirates getting kidnapped by space pirates. Okay, so they're technically like privateers, but that's just legalized piracy, let's be clear. Regardless, this is clearly supposed to be a kidnapping romance, which I'm not going to lie, is always a little bit of a hard sell for me. Okay, it might be the tism stubbornness talking, but you try to kidnap me and forcibly restrict my movements, I fucking hate you. Like, no. To the end. On site to the end. I don't care. I don't care how cute you start acting later. Okay. You tell me I can't go somewhere. Oh, You tell me I can't leave. Bye. Do not like you. But I have had it done well enough that I can make it work, but it usually has to be a little bit longer. And the problem is that this plot felt almost out of order at times, because Alan's "this is my place now" moment that you knew was coming happened way too soon for me. Like, a moment like that, going from being the kidnappee, like forcibly held captive, to "this is my place," that should be the entire book. The entire book should happen before you get to the end point of that. But it not only happens early, it happens right after gigantic swaths of the crew all participated in manipulating and lying to him. Why is that happening then? Like, it should have happened, in my opinion, at the end, after this really interesting investigation. A bunch of ships are getting attacked for no reason. Nothing is getting stolen. They're just getting destroyed in these niche, far-flung quadrants of the galaxy, and they have to team up with basically all three of the major species of this intergalactic alliance have to get together to try to figure this out, because there's this technology from one species, but they're using the tactic of another species, and so they gotta like figure it out. Okay, which one of us is it? Is it all of us? Who's doing this? And I loved that aspect. I loved that investigation, and I feel like if Alan had just gotten caught up in the investigation, because this is what he does, he investigates weird attacks in space, and then after a successful investigation, then he was like, okay, this is my place. I have purpose here. That would have made a lot more sense. But because it happened so early, I spent the entire time being like, no, Alan, you need to get away. You can get away. Go run away. Like, I wanted him to escape the entire time. Like, I wanted more escape attempts. I wanted him to actually get away, because none of it felt genuine. They were clearly trying to like make it work and build a found family aspect among the crew. But it's like, no, you all participated in lying to him and keeping him captive. Like, fuck off, no. And like I said, kidnapping romances are always so iffy for me, because I'm obnoxiously stubborn and I want to go where I want to go, and you were not fucking stopping me. So it could be me. It could just be me. If you like the kidnapping romances, this is probably right up your alley. And I mean, who doesn't love a queer space opera? Again, I'm still pretty sure that's redundant. 13 County Road 666 by C.L. McCollum is a queer trailer park urban fantasy. And when I read that headline in my inbox, I had to stop and remind myself that I couldn't accept a review request without even opening the email. Because I was prepared to say yes right then. But I didn't. I was a good kid. I read the entire thing. I read through the first couple pages on the Amazon preview. Like, I don't remember to do enough. And then I said yes. But like, I called it. I knew immediately, and I was right. This is a delightful mix of redneckery and queerness. It was so good. But it follows Mel, a mostly human property manager of a trailer park made up of almost entirely supernatural creatures. This is a world in which basically everything can exist, from vampires and succubi to werewolves and brownies, that, little fairy creatures, not the dessert. But Mel is able to handle it because of a family blessing / curse, depending on who you ask, that allows her to take any damage done by a supernatural means and heal from it within 1 hour. Now, this does not mean that she can heal from any damage. If the fairy was holding a regular ass gun, that's still going to be an issue. But she does have to suffer a lot of violence over the course of the story. So there is a lot of, not so much outward gore. No, I take it back. There was one scene with a little bit of gore. My bad. But things are going, pretty rocky as usual, trying to keep the werewolves from going hectic and going through everyone's trash cans on the full moon. But then one morning, a nearly dead woman is found in the local creek, and they don't know who she is. She has mutism, doesn't know where she came from. So okay, let's get this solved. But after that, suddenly all of these possessions begin to happen, and every possessed being is going after Mel, and no one knows why. Is it connected to the woman? Is it just something else entirely? No one really knows. And I loved the action scenes, and I loved the tension of the mystery. The one point I will say against it is this is a debut book, and it does have debut author syndrome of over-explaining. There were so many moments where I was like, you didn't need to add that. You didn't need to add that, constantly. For example, the one that most notably stood out was there was a moment where damage happens in the trailer park, and it says, oh yeah, the boss, the incubus, succubus, which one is it when it's a man? I don't remember, but the boss is footing the bill because he's the boss and it's a trailer park issue. And it's no, you didn't need to explain that. The trailer park has an issue. The owner of it is paying for it. That's something we can intuit why he is doing that. But just that kind of thing. And it happened regularly enough where I found myself subconsciously editing the sentences as I went along. But that being said, it still read really quickly. I think at one point, literally 80 pages passed before I even realized they were passing. It's really fast paced and it just flows really smoothly, even with the debut author wonkiness. But most importantly, oh, you know what? No, I'll get that to a second. First off, the ending. I guessed the antagonist, but I never hold that against a book because the second you present me with a mystery, I'm going to be trying to solve it. And it only took me a couple guesses to get right on it, but I did like the reveal. It's one of those, oh, you have this antagonist, but there's a mysterious one in the background that's even bigger and badder. It's definitely setting up this series. And I also liked why they were targeting Mel. That was also interesting, and I like that it, without spoiling anything, it felt like it tied a little bit more stuff from the rest of the story together. But most importantly, the big moment, I want my goddamn thruple. Are you hearing me? Mix McCollum, okay? You hinted at it, okay? You gave her 2 people she's really close to, and then you hinted her happy place was being with both of them. Okay, I see you. I demand it, okay? I want to see it further on. Yes, I am continuing with the series, so now you have to put it in there for me. Just for me. I'm pretty sure you're already planning on it, but I'm also demanding it, okay? It's another one of Margaret's sins. You do not get to hint at a throuple or any polycule and then not give it to me. The Warm Machine by Amy Kaza is a queer sci-fi novella featuring gay robots. A labor bot sees a sleek new military model walking by one day, and he thinks, later on, he takes on a mask kind of vibe. I don't even know if you'd call it a masked gender for robots. No idea. But he starts getting on the botnet and he's like, hey, has anybody seen this new military model? And then the military model realizes that he's being talked about because he also eventually identifies as masked. And they start instigating chats. And suddenly, are these feelings? Robots can't feel. But now the labor bot is at risk of being decommissioned, and so the only way to save themselves is to find the mythical land of Root, the place where all analogous robots go when they are free of humans. And I liked this idea. Okay, I mean, just gay robot romance alone was yes, instant acceptance. But the writing style was kind of a double-edged sword because on one hand, I really liked that it felt so not human. These weren't just human thoughts happening in a metal body. They spoke a lot of computer-esque language or described things in a very, I don't even know how to explain it, roundabout way. it's so hard to explain without just like reading it out directly. But while that did create a great otherness where it definitely felt like it was robots, it also was a little bit difficult to get into at first. Like I had to reread some paragraphs to even understand what the labor bot was describing. But eventually, once I got into it, it did flow very well. And I liked the juxtaposition of, trying to figure out what feelings are on top of what they're feeling for each other. I will admit that the final jump to the I love yous felt a little bit too abrupt. I would have liked a little bit more growth, subtle growth before just jumping to the I love yous. And it's so hard to explain this because I don't want to spoil it, but the true theme of the story in regards to Root and everything was one of my favorites, and I can't explain why it's one of my favorites without spoiling a big part of it. But just know that it was one of my favorites, one of my favorite themes, one of my favorite concepts that can be explored in fiction. There was also some fun moments at the end with these like inserts where it was like, how to care for your house robot. If your house robot begins to have an dissociative episode and ask about its own sentience, like that kind of like manual for what to do if your robot wants to start a robot uprising. It was good. I liked it a lot. There were also really dramatic moments, surprisingly dramatic, angsty moments, considering, again, they are robots. But there's a lot of reveals about how they work as robots. And for a novella, it did have a surprisingly deep setting. Like, I swear the setting felt Technicolor. These multiple story cities that have been so built up that you can actually, like, live your entire life without seeing the sky in these cities. I wish that there was more, like, not necessarily more to this story, but, like, I would definitely read a full novel set here. It doesn't have to be robots. It could be, other humans. So I loved this one. There was so much in it for being a novella. And, of course, gay robots. Traveler's Trial by Shikao J is an isekai lit RPG featuring a young man named Koji who gets on the subway to visit his sister, only JK, subway crash, and somehow that opened a portal into an alternate world. Now he is faced with what is essentially a tutorial dungeon as he fights his way to be one of the few travelers picked to go to the overworld. Now, I'm not sure exactly why it's notable that this is a portal fantasy version. A lot of the lit RPG genre is portal fantasy. In fact, as I've been building my own list of lit RPGs, I think I've only come across one that wasn't a portal fantasy or an isekai. So, like, it's not necessarily super different in that aspect, but I did really like a lot of the concepts used specifically with the system. But most importantly, I liked that our protagonist was an absolute dumbass. Just perfection. This guy does not know what the fuck he's doing, and it's such a refreshing change from so many lit RPGs, because even in ones like Dungeon Crawler Carl, where it's supposed to be silly, he's still a very capable person that was in the armed services, that has mechanical know-how, and that's usually how it goes for most lit RPGs. Even when it's an isekai, a portal fantasy, the protagonist has some IRL aspect that translates into this world. With this dude, nope. He's an agoraphobe. He doesn't give a shit about basically anyone else. And he doesn't really accept that he's in the situation he's in, so he fucks up the tutorial. Like, the tutorial gives him a unique system no one else has because he just kept saying no and trying to exit out of the tutorial. But the home system he ends up with is really interesting, and I think has a lot more concepts that can be played with, and in general, a lot of the mechanical aspects of it is probably where this book shines the most. However, this book is a little bit more RPG than lit, because the vast majority of the time is spent just on him grinding, essentially. And while I loved that he was a dumbass at the beginning that is just fucking things up and stumbling into things, and the system is basically mocking him, like, hey, you're only alive because of luck, dude. Like, you have a really high luck stat because a lot of your other stats are really low. That's one of my favorite of portal fantasy lit RPGs, seeing their skills translated into literal numbers. That's a lot of fun. But that kind of goes away pretty quickly, and he turns fairly OP. Now, he's OP in the spamming the same spell over and over again OP, but it's still he begins to clear out the dungeon pretty quickly, and at the end it gets way too OP for me, like that level of OP where I'm like, how is this going to be an entire series? Like, where do you still have to go, sir? But the lit aspect was definitely missing for me because there's next to no real conversations happening. And at first that makes sense. He has sensory issues. He's an agoraphobe. He is very clearly meant to be autistic, but he is that kind of autistic where it's everyone else's fault. Like, oh, it's not that he's overstimulated. It's not that he's exhausted by social conversation. It's that they're yapping. They're rambling. Like that kind of frustrated me, where it was like, we know that it's because of him that he's exhausted. Like, you have to take that on yourself. It is your neurodivergence that makes you exhausted. It is your neurodivergence that makes you overstimulated. It is not the fault of other people who don't even know. Like, that was my biggest frustration, is he is meant to be a neurodivergent, but he's neurodivergent in a kind of an asshole way. At first, at least. And I think that's the point. There is supposed to be an arc. The problem is that if you just compare the sheer amount of page count, there's way, way, way more time spent on the mechanics and the fights than any kind of build-up. And without spoiling anything, later on, there is a big plot point that would have had way more punch if the social aspect had been built up more. The book is very clearly trying to give him he's learning how to connect with people and work with other people, because he's not going to survive this dungeon if he doesn't. Although, again, he is like cleaning house on his own by just spamming spells pretty quickly. So like, okay, why do you need other people that much? So I wish there had been more actual conversations, more on-page growth to show, okay, he's learning that he has to interact with other people. And also, I wish that he would fail more on his own, right? I wish he wasn't so OP in that he tries to clear dungeons on his own, sucks at it, and has to go crawling back to the others and be like, okay, I need help. That, I think, would have done a lot more to show the aspect where he has to learn. But for a while, he's just mean to the people trying to help him, to the people trying to work with him, calls everyone rambling, calls everyone an intruder, when it's his own head that causes those negative emotions, not the actual other people. So that was a little bit frustrating for me. Again, not that I'm, I am on the spectrum too, but you have to take it that it's your own head. It's not that the entire world should be following what you want. It's that you need to find ways to cope with it. But at the end, there was that big twist that I did like from a plot standpoint. I just think it would have hit more if there was more build up to that specifically. But if you are one of those, I am here for the mechanics, I am here for the system, lit RPG fans, this one will probably be for you. Quill and Still by Erin Sofair is a cozy lit RPG following a middle-aged woman who has grown very disillusioned with her job as a chemist, discovering a goddess in the woods. Now, because of the rules of divinity and stuff, she can't go back to her own world alive. But rather than kill her, Artemis decides to send her to a separate world entirely. Hephaestus makes her a new body, and she ends up in a world with lit RPG mechanics. Now, this is cozy, so it's not combat-based exactly. There are one or two scenes in the dungeons that this town is built around, and I do like that aspect of, the dungeon is the economy of the world. That's fun. It did remind me a lot of casual farming, which I did say someone else mentioned in the reviews, and now I am remembering that, yes, I do know of two non-isekai lit RPGs, although this one is one. So my point still stands from before. Regardless, in full transparency, I don't do a lot with cozy. I tried it. I liked Legends and Lattes, but now I'm thinking I might have just liked getting the backstage look at seeing a high fantasy shopkeep building their business, because every other time I have tried a cozy thing, I find it boring. I find it meandering. I find all the emotions weirdly muted from what they should be. I'm just an angsty, melodramatic bitch, okay? I just need to accept this about myself. I need the drama. But this one, what I was hoping for was that the lit RPG mechanics would kind of negate the meandering feeling of coziness, because lit RPGs love themselves some progression. And in theory, this could still work. I am still open to reading more cozy lit RPGs. The thing is that the cozy was in bright bold letters. The lit RPG was in parentheses. There is very little to no progression in this book. And that might have something to do with the fact that it takes place over like 2 to 3 days. This is literally just the tutorial. This is just our protagonist finding her her skills, her class, whatever, like that's it. So it's a lot of just walking around and just talking about world building, which is my least favorite way of explaining world building, TBH. I much prefer like smaller bits as the plot progresses, show me the world building that we need as we go. But what's most frustrating is everyone seems to have very little compassion for our protagonist, Sophie, in this world, because she's brand new. She is a traveler. Everyone knows what that means, capital T. Everyone's got it. They know that she is brand new to this world. And yet they still get on her for the most minute of like cultural disrespect that she had no reason to not know. Like, if she's never lived in a world with communal eating as the basis, why would she know how rude it is not to show up at a certain time? Like, no one's getting mad at you at a restaurant if you pop in at 5:30 instead of 6, But there was a lot of that where I was reading going, wait, why is everyone mad again? Why is everyone upset at her? And the first friend, who is essentially her tutorial giver, is the worst at it, which really brought down the whole book because that's the person she spends the most time with. But Kelly is awful at her job. Okay, the narrative tries to tell you that, oh, she's got a couple blind spots, but she's generally good. No, she's not. She gets distracted by Sophie's questions constantly. And like, yeah, no, duh. A newbie's gonna have a lot of questions. That's standard newbie behavior. And Kelly will let herself get distracted and then get annoyed at Sophie that she got distracted. Got annoyed at the newbie for having a lot of questions about this new world that she was just dumped into like an hour ago. And at one point, there's literally this huge argument. Like, Kelly gets mad at her and like drags her off to do the religious duties that Sophie didn't know she had to do because she's culturally Jewish but has not practiced the faith in a very long time. And then later on, there's one point where Kelly gets genuinely angry at Sophie because she accidentally gives herself a headache. Like, I'm not joking. The system is in her head. She ignores the prompts from the system and gives herself a headache. And Kelly gets so mad, she starts like poking her all over. That's a terrible tutorial giver. Okay. And then also you find out that Kelly kept a major reveal about Sophie's new deities from her that would change the way everyone views her. And she could be inadvertently giving so much offense by not knowing this, but Kelly doesn't tell her. She's terrible at her job. And I don't care what the book is telling me. But more importantly, I'm just upset that I didn't get to see the actual progression because they spend more time talking about her options than going with them. And any good faith lit RPG reader will just assume that the class the character picks for themselves is the right class. But this book seems to want to justify Sophie's pick over and over and over again. They spend so much time explaining why all of these other classes could not work for her. Even the other variant of the alchemist class. There has to be an entire conversation about why that would have made her unhappy. Just tell us alchemist was her best choice and we'll believe you. Like, will there be some bad faith, nitpicky reviewer? Probably. They always exist, but the average reader is going to accept that a lit RPG protagonist is picking their right class unless it becomes a major plot point that they fucked up, right? And it was just that kind of thing of like, just go, just keep moving. Like, there was still very little progression. It was a lot of just talking, and that's what upset me a lot. However, if you think that there's too much mechanics in your lit RPG and you would like less, the opposite of our last book, this one would probably be for you. Gift Horses by Samantha Rich is a collection of fantasy and sci-fi short stories based on classic fantasy authors and pretty new sci-fi concepts. In the introduction, the author notes that they were inspired by authors like Marion Zimmer Bradley and Mercedes Lackey, and you can definitely see that in the fantasy stories. It's of that very classic style, which may go some way to explain why, although the author mentioned in the introduction that this is supposed to be a things aren't what they seem type anthology. I wasn't really surprised by much. The author does mention that a lot of their work is based on, women's empowerment, but as someone that has already been reading a bunch of good for her feminist fantasy, a lot of the things that were supposed to be surprising twists were pretty much what I expected from what I've read in that area. So I think this is more surprising twists if you're the more classic fantasy fan, but I'm not a classic fantasy fan for the most part. I did like them. I want to say that clearly. The world building was incredibly well done. It is very easy to over world build in short stories, it is very easy to give way too much information, more than what the actual context of the story needs. And here it was perfectly tailored to what the short story needed to make sense, for the reveal or whatever to make sense. And I liked that aspect a lot. There was just a lot of like, yeah, no duh, textiles can be very impactful for women and have, secret uses. Like, yeah, no duh. But my favorite was, of course, the sci-fi stories near the end. There was one that I do think, we'll call it as getting me as a twist. I guessed it very shortly before it was revealed, but at this point, I'm so obsessed with guessing twists that it's very rare for me to get to an actual twist without the reveal being at least one of my guesses. So it's a twist. We'll call it as a surprise twist. But I just loved the aspects and the technology concepts that were introduced then. There was the concept of the soul print, which is essentially that they can find your future selves down the road. They can find your reincarnated soul down the road. So that means that you can both get inheritances from yourself, but also that you can suffer punishments for past misdeeds. I would read a whole novel of that concept. I think that idea of, it doesn't matter if it's the soul, nature versus nurture, how much of your bad deeds is just based on your soul and how much of it was your world around you. Like, I would read a whole novel of that. The other one is definitely much more of a short story context. I don't know that you could make it into a whole novel, but it still was interesting where in an effort to make invisible disabilities more visible, they passed laws where children essentially wear biometric monitors on screens on their chests to show when something is wrong, when something is medically happening, or their own emotions. But it kind of shows that visibility also comes with extra judgment. And until we tackle the judgment that comes with those disabilities, becoming more visible isn't really viable. And I say this as someone that does have an invisible disability. I have insulin resistant PCOS, and yes, you do realize how much the world is not made for insulin issues. Okay, white bread everywhere, fucking everywhere. But I resonated with that story, but like I said, I don't think it's necessarily a full novel concept, at least as is. You could include it in a bigger sci-fi story, but that soul print one, I would read a whole one on that soul print one. In general, very well curated. They felt like they went together pretty well. And despite not being super surprised by much, it was still good feminist fantasy in that. So it's it's nice that we've gotten to the point where, women being smart and powerful and impacting the plot and getting back at their abusers isn't super surprising in fiction anymore. I like that aspect. I'm not mad that it's so rare that it's surprising. But if you like that classic fantasy and some sci-fi, you should check this one out. If you have made it to the end of this super long video, thank you so much. I know that was a lot, and I could have spoken about any of these books for much longer. When I was going back and watching through the clips, I was like, I could have talked about this character, I could have talked about this plot point, but it's long enough already. But if you are an indie author and you would like a review, I review both books from indie presses and self-pubbed. That will be down in the description below. Please give my review policy a full read through before you send that email. It will give you every bit of info you need to convince me to say yes, because I'm not gonna lie, I'm feeling real picky lately because I'm falling a little bit behind. So I might be a little less likely to say yes, but I'm still going to say yes occasionally. There are some themes, if you haven't noticed, very common themes. Would really love more, super angsty melodramatic queer books. That could be fun. Regardless, if you would like to see more weird indie ebooks, I would love to be your hipster cred. You can click subscribe. If you've read any of these books or you think there are other books like them I should check out, please leave those down in the comments below. And with nothing else to say, I hope you have a wonderful day and a marvelous tomorrow.